I'm the highest civilization in the universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 276, Exposed. At this moment, Li Ming felt that he was not breathing air mixed with multiple gases, but oxygen of extremely high purity. As far as Li Ming's body was concerned, this oxygen only made Li Ming feel comfortable, and there was no abnormality at all. At this time, Li Ming showed a faint smile on his face and whispered, "Poison gas? Where does the poison gas come from? How refreshing and comfortable." Li Ming was enjoying it. Xenozoi, who had already walked away, suddenly turned around and looked at his spaceship. This inadvertent turn also immediately noticed Li Ming. Xenozoi frowned slightly. Li Ming was still the same as his tribesman at this moment, with 4 hands, 2 legs and a tail. "Hey, why are you here?" Xenozoi's paused figure suddenly shouted. Li Ming turned around and looked at Xenozoi, but did not reply. Xenozoi stared at Li Ming intently, hesitated for a moment, and waved to Li Ming, motioning Li Ming to come over. Li Ming was confused for a while, but after looking at his hands and body, he realized that he was still in the disguise period. No wonder the other party had such an attitude. Li Ming ran over quickly. After a moment, Li Ming approached with a smile. Xenozoi looked Li Ming up and down, raised her hand, and threw a metal ball out, saying, "This is a protective suit, you put it on first." Li Ming reached out to take it, looked at the gray sphere, and hesitated for a moment, but still squeezed it hard according to Xenozoi's previous operation, and the gray dust filled his body. Li Ming had already put on the protective suit. Xenozoi nodded with satisfaction, with a little dissatisfaction on her face, and said sternly, "Since you followed me unintentionally, then follow me." Li Ming nodded slightly, without saying much. Following Xenozoi, Li Ming walked slowly, occasionally looking at the other party with his eyes, and his mind was full of thoughts. Li Ming was originally prepared to take action directly. With Li Ming's 9th level strength, even the power civilization and the wisdom civilization could not fight with him, let alone the biological civilization in front of him. However, for the sake of safety, Li Ming decided to take action after a while. Because this Xenozoi is looking for a secluded place to advance, the opponent must be the weakest when advancing, and that time is undoubtedly the best time to take action. As Li Ming thought so, Xenozoi in front of him suddenly stopped, and Li Ming also stopped at this time, and looked at the mountain beside him. There is a cave at the foot of the mountain. It is called a cave, but it is actually a depression at the bottom of the mountain. It is only 2 or 3 meters long and wide, and only about 5 or 6 meters deep. Xenozoi stared at the cave for a while, and then looked at other places in the mountain. There is indeed no better place in the whole area than here. Xenozoi turned his eyes and looked at Li Ming and said coldly, "You wait here." As soon as he finished speaking, Xenozoi walked towards the cave. After a few steps, his tall figure stood at the entrance of the cave. He did not intend to enter immediately. He shook his right hand, and the cloak behind him suddenly fluttered, and the lion pattern on the cloak suddenly shone brightly. A roar came out, and a figure leaped out from the light on the cloak. A ferocious beast had appeared. This beast was 2 meters tall and more than 5 meters long. Its appearance was similar to that of a lion, except that it had an extra eye on its forehead. This extra eye was green, and it flickered with a faint light, which made people feel cold. Li Ming recognized this beast immediately with a glance. The information of this beast had already appeared in the beast family illustration. The hunting beast was of the same kind as the terrifying beast that Li Ming had encountered before. They both had 3 eyes. Although they were not demon beasts, their abilities should not be underestimated. The one in front of him had even reached the 9th level. Taming a 9th level wild beast required extremely high animal taming abilities of biological civilization. The guy in front of him was obviously not simple. After all, he was the one who tamed a 9th level wild beast. Li Ming looked at the hunting beast carefully. His eyes were indifferent, without much expression, but the hunting beast seemed to have some interest in Li Ming. It took a few steps towards Li Ming with its light feet, and the green single eye stared straight at Li Ming. The beast opened its mouth in anger, revealing its sharp fangs, and let out a series of roars. It seemed to be shouting at Li Ming, and with the ability of wisdom, the thoughts of this wild beast were also captured by Li Ming. Li Ming shrank slightly, his eyes focused, revealing a look of surprise. From the roar of the hunting beast, Li Ming obtained a strange message. This beast actually recognized Li Ming's identity. Li Ming was confident that this camouflage potion could deceive any opponent, but he didn't expect that this wild beast could recognize it. Li Ming's slightly narrowed eyes immediately turned and looked at Xenozoi. After hearing the roar of the hunting beast, Xenozoi also looked at Li Ming in surprise and looked at the hunting beast in confusion. Beast, don't you even recognize my people? Xenozoi scolded harshly. But the hunting beast ignored it and continued to roar angrily at Li Ming. While roaring, its steps continued to approach Li Ming. Xenozoi seemed to have noticed something unusual at this time. He moved to the front of the hunting beast and looked at Li Ming carefully again. Who are you? Xenozoi shouted sharply and seemed to see something strange about Li Ming in his eyes. Li Ming saw this and knew that he could no longer hide it. Without saying a word, he stretched out his right hand and shot out a powerful electromagnetic wave. A sound of kai sounded, and the high temperature of the electric current flashed. Bang! There was another muffled sound. Xenozoi also raised his hand, and with a flash of green light, he actually directly blocked Li Ming's electromagnetic wave. Since he had already started, he had to kill with one strike as much as possible. Li Ming suddenly increased the energy injection, and the electromagnetic wave spread out instantly. The powerful energy body also expanded and exploded around Li Ming. Pa, creak. Various mixed sounds were heard incessantly. The fluctuations generated by the electromagnetic wave shattered the surrounding rocks, and the flowing stones flew across, cutting all the surrounding objects like a gust of blade wind. From a distance, it was like a burst of air knife suddenly spread out, cutting off all the objects around Li Ming. At the same time, the electromagnetic wave suddenly rose, and the white light current formed the head of a beast, 5 or 6 meters high and 3 or 4 meters wide, as if it was about to swallow Xenozoi in one bite. Xenozoi's eyebrows squeezed together, and with a wave of his right arm, he drew a semicircle in front of him. The green light passed by Xenozoi's arm, and a purple vine swept out. This vine was as thick as a human body, and it rotated like a spring. As soon as it appeared, the electromagnetic beast head released by Li Ming was entangled by the vine. As soon as it approached, the seemingly ordinary purple vine suddenly tightened, like a rope being tightened, causing the shape of the electromagnetic beast head to change suddenly, becoming an irregular current. Bang! Snap! After 2 sounds, the electromagnetic wave shattered and disappeared, turning into dots of starlight, but the vine also cracked inch by inch and scattered, as if a brick was smashed. The vines were supposed to be plants, but after breaking into pieces of stone, it was extremely strange. Xenozoi could no longer hide the anger on her face. She looked at Li Ming viciously, her lips slightly opened to reveal her sharp teeth, and she said word by word, "You are not a Dina person." At this time, Li Ming's 9th level aura had been fully revealed, but the appearance of his body had not changed at all. He still looked like a Dina person. He had taken too many camouflage potions, which made Li Ming unable to return to his original state in a short time. Xenozoi looked at Li Ming coldly, clenched his right hand slightly, and did not take Li Ming into consideration in his cold eyes. "No matter who you are, or what your purpose is." As he spoke, he gently raised his right hand, and the green light in his palm flashed like a ball of green water beads. His body suddenly bent, and the palm holding the green water bead slammed on the ground. "There is only one way to die here. Hell magic dance." Xenozoi shouted angrily. The green light formed a circular ring between Xenozoi's palm and the ground, and then exploded with a bang. The shock wave formed a gust of wind and waves that blew Xenozoi's cloak, and even the hair of the hunting beast behind him moved with the waves. Li Ming's right hand could not help but block in front of him, resisting the air waves of the shock wave. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the green light ripples. His clothes also fluttered with it. The green light shock wave flashed by in an instant. The impact was like a hurricane blowing in the face. It only lasted for 1 or 2 seconds and then disappeared. Everything returned to calm, as if the whole world had suddenly quieted down, but this silence made people feel inexplicably dead, as if they had come to hell. Chapter 277, Vine Cage. After a few seconds of silence, the ground and the rocks of the nearby mountains shook slightly, like a weak earthquake. Boom boom boom. A series of explosions shook the eardrums, and the rocks on the ground of the mountain exploded, as if they were blasted, with gravel flying, dust flying, and thick black vines flying out from them. The vine was 1 meter in diameter, extremely thick, and black in color, like a pipe. Li Ming's eyes swept around, not daring to neglect it, and his whole body suddenly banged with a green light, like a piece of gasoline was suddenly ignited. The green light turned into a flame, and wrapped Li Ming in it. At this time, the surroundings were full of dancing vines, each of which was like a devil's claw. These vines looked like a whip, with a thicker root and a thinner top, and were as flexible as a snake. Li Ming narrowed his eyes, and stared at Xenazoi opposite him. The powerful mental power had filled the surroundings, which was extremely important in the battle. Xenazoi's half-crouching body slowly stood up, and her eyebrows occasionally jumped as she looked at the green flames on Li Ming's body. The two of them were already on the verge of a fight, and Li Ming felt a little pressure, because in Li Ming's cognition, he had never encountered an opponent in the 9th level civilization, and even Li Ming could easily deal with non-advanced 9th level civilizations, but the man in front of him seemed to be a little abnormal. Just as Li Ming was concentrating on staring at the other party, his eyes suddenly widened a little, and a flash of thought passed through his mind, and he had already sensed the danger in advance. Xenazoi on the opposite side suddenly waved at Li Ming, as if giving some orders. The dancing vines tightened their bodies, and shot out with a whoosh, like a venomous snake that suddenly attacked, with speed and power, bursting out in less than a second. With a flash of green light, Li Ming jumped to a rock not far away, but just as his feet left the ground, the place where he was standing exploded with a boom, and 4 or 5 vines inserted into the place where Li Ming had stood before. The speed was so fast that it was hard to keep up with. The gravel splashed everywhere, and a big pit was already formed on the hard rock. These seemingly soft vines were extremely hard once they attacked. The rocks were like clods of earth in front of them, and they were vulnerable. Fortunately, Li Ming had the ability to predict spiritual civilization, otherwise he would have been pierced by these vines in that instant. Li Ming's movement speed was obviously not as fast as those vines, but dodging in advance made up for the lack of speed. Xenazoi was slightly surprised. It seemed that in his cognition, this kind of attack could only be defended, not avoided, and Li Ming's behavior also surprised him a little. Li Ming was also slightly shocked. The intensity of the vine's attack was still beyond his expectations. Xenazoi turned his eyes back to Li Ming and snorted contemptuously. As soon as the sound was over, the vines attacked again. The density of the following attacks increased significantly. Li Ming narrowed his eyes and responded more seriously. Just as he dodged one wave of attacks, another wave of attacks came. The speed of the vines remained the same, but the frequency increased several times. With the ability to perceive, Li Ming's figure jumped around. From a distance, he looked like a ball of fire flying back and forth, but the attacking vines were even worse. Only black lines could be seen quickly interweaving and vibrating everywhere with rumbling sounds. The black lines and green lights changed alternately. Under a fierce attack, the vines that seemed to be extremely fast could not even catch Li Ming's shadow. This also made the vines' attack pause. Li Ming's green shadow flashed and fell on a rock. He raised his eyes slightly and looked at Xenazoi in the distance. His eyeballs shone slightly in his eye sockets. The black eyeballs condensed and turned into golden water droplets. The cyan flames on his body began to be accompanied by white arcs, and the sound of kai kai was endless. Xenazoi stared at Li Ming with his eyes fixed, and whispered with his mouth slightly opened, "He is really an extraordinary guy." Humph. With a hum, Xenazoi's eyes suddenly looked at the hunting beast behind him, and then looked back at Li Ming. The hunting beast seemed to understand what Xenazoi meant, and walked slowly to Xenazoi's front with light steps. The green eye immediately focused on Li Ming, and the green light flashed, revealing a strange breath in the eye. With a light sound of snap, the hunting beast's limbs kicked hard, and its body shot out like a grey light, rushing towards Li Ming. Li Ming did not dare to neglect it, and clenched his hands hard, and the sound of crackling immediately filled the surroundings, and the white electric light quickly condensed, forming an electric light armor on Li Ming's body. Seeing the oncoming hunting beast, Li Ming's eyebrows gathered, and he pushed his feet hard to meet it. The hunting beast in the air opened its mouth, and a green bead had already formed in its mouth, which was aimed at Li Ming and sprayed directly. Li Ming had already anticipated the opponent's attack, and he easily dodged it with a flash, and at the same time, his figure flashed to the sky above the hunting beast. He clenched his fist and smashed it hard on the beast's head. This lightning strike was so fast that it was far away just now, but it came to the top of the hunting beast's head in the blink of an eye. Without the mental strength of Li Ming, it was almost impossible to dodge. Bang! A cracking sound was heard, and a black vine appeared under Li Ming's fist. What the hell? Li Ming was secretly shocked. At the same time, other vines flashed, but this time the vines did not directly attack Li Ming's body, but crisscrossed and woven with each other, forming a cage with Li Ming as the center. It was like weaving a basket with ropes, but this weaving was airtight. From a distance, the roots of the vines were normal, but the tops were all entangled together, forming a green plant sphere in the air. Although Li Ming could predict, some things could not be changed even after prediction. At this time, Xenozoi smiled slightly, snorted, and said, "This time, I can't escape." As he spoke, Xenozoi stepped forward, approaching the green plant cage step by step. Just after taking a few steps, Xenozoi suddenly stopped, looked up and stared at the vines in the sky, his eyes showing a strange color. I saw a flash of white light, and the light shot out from the gaps between the vines. At this time, it seemed that the green plant cage was not surrounding Li Ming, but a sun. The light became stronger and stronger, as if something was about to burst out from it, and the cage was like a person's hands, seemingly catching the prey, but the prey was becoming a hot potato, and breaking free from the restraints little by little. Not good. Xenozoi yelled, and her figure quickly jumped back and retreated to a distance. The next moment, a loud boom sounded, and the white energy body stretched out its restraints and released itself. The vines were broken one by one, and some were even reduced to ashes under the high temperature. The white light flashed and disappeared, like a flash bomb that exploded instantly. After feeling a glare, his eyes quickly returned to normal. At this time, only Li Ming's figure was left in the air. Li Ming's face was extremely ugly. This was the first time Li Ming had encountered such a powerful opponent since Adriana. His figure slowly fell, like a god descending from the sky. His feet landed steadily on the ground. On the surface, Li Ming's calm expression did not seem to be too unusual, but his complicated heart was already constantly muttering, "This guy's really good at it." His eyes kept looking at Xenozoi, and Xenozoi also looked back at Li Ming. In Xenozoi's eyes, it seemed that he had never seen such an opponent before. To the far left of Li Ming was the hunting beast, and in front of him was Xenozoi. As for the black vines, only the roots were left, and there was no movement. However, this hunting beast was a 9th level wild beast, and it was very powerful. If Li Ming wanted to kill Xenozoi, he had to be distracted to guard against this hunting beast, which was extremely disadvantageous to Li Ming. Thinking of this, Li Ming shook the cloak behind him, and saw a flash of light, and Moore and Walker jumped out together. This time, Walker stood solemnly in front of Li Ming as soon as he appeared, and Moore stepped on Walker's back. The two beasts were in a tense state of preparation for battle as soon as they appeared, as if they knew Li Ming's situation very well when they were in the beast cloud habitation clothes. Chapter 278 9th level Stardust Weapon, Vine Demon. Li Ming glanced at the god hunter not far away and said, "I'll leave that guy to you two. I need to focus on Xenozoi." Moore turned his head and was startled when he saw the ferocious god hunter. He shrank slightly and turned around and yelled at Li Ming, "What a joke. That guy's level 9. You're asking us to." As Moore was talking, Walker under his feet had turned to Li Ming's left and walked towards the god hunter. Seeing himself slowly approaching the grinning god hunter, Moore suddenly put his head close to Walker's ear and said, "Brother, are you crazy? We will die ugly." The voice was very low and was whispered into Walker's ear, but Walker seemed not to hear it and continued walking until he stopped more than 10 meters in front of the god hunter. Moore became even more nervous at this time. He continued to get close to Walker's ear and covered his mouth with his wings and whispered, "This three-eyed monster is obviously not a good guy. We don't want to risk our lives. Look at this loser Li Ming. He either asks us to guard the door or to die. Should we?" Without waiting for Moore to continue, Walker's fierce eyes suddenly glanced at Moore on his back and said, "If you don't shut up, I will kill you first." Moore stood up straight and didn't dare to say anything more. At this time, Xenazoi in the distance turned his eyes slightly and looked at Moore and Walker. The two little beasts were not taken seriously by him, but after his eyes returned to Li Ming, he said coldly, "Have you even taken out the pets?" Li Ming couldn't help but look at Moore and Walker, and then at the hunting beast, without saying anything more. Before Li Ming took action, the hunting beast suddenly started to walk towards Walker. After taking 2 steps, Moore suddenly yelled "Ah!" and raised his wings, making a stop gesture like a human hand. The hunter beast also stood there strangely, staring at Moore with 3 beast eyes. At this time, Moore retracted his wings, stepped forward 2 steps, and stepped on Walker's head, and said proudly, "Hey, 3-eyed monster, look carefully, there are 2 of us." The hunter beast looked up and down, looked at Moore and Walker, and raised the corners of his mouth with disdain, revealing all his fangs. The next moment, a strange scene happened. The left and right sides of the hunter beast's body suddenly twisted, as if the fur and flesh on the surface of the body were rolled up. After the twisting and deformation, a face of the hunter beast suddenly appeared, as if the hunter beast had grown another face on each side of its abdomen. A few seconds later, the 2 faces suddenly protruded from the body, as if they were about to drill out of its body. Moore opened his eyes wide at this scene, and his mouth opened a little wider. Li Ming did not move his head, but turned his eyes to the side, and saw that 2 more beasts suddenly came out from both sides of the body of the hunting beast. One came from the left side of the abdomen, and the other came from the right side of the abdomen. First the head, then the front half of the body, the front paws, and the back paws, until all of them came out. The original one hunting beast suddenly became 3, exactly the same, standing side by side in front of Walker and Moore. Li Ming sensed all the changes of the hunting beast very clearly. This 9th level wild beast would definitely become the biggest trouble for Walker and Moore, and what Li Ming could do was to get rid of Xenazoi before they did. The golden water drop's eyes turned slightly, and Li Ming's figure shot out like lightning. The sound of the arc whistled in his ears, and the sound just flashed, and the lightning had already reached Xenazoi. Xenazoi remained calm, and waved his right hand in front of him. A purple vine blocked his body horizontally, but this vine was completely different from the previous one. This vine was only as thick as a finger. One end was held in Xenazoi's hand, and the rest was placed against her arm to block in front of her. With a light sound of snap, Li Ming's palm slapped on the vine. The flashing electric light immediately became weak, before it could emit power. The energy was absorbed by the vine. As soon as he felt the loss of energy, Li Ming frowned slightly, hurriedly retracted his hand, and jumped back to a distance. With his keen eyes, Li Ming suddenly discovered the mystery and whispered, "This vine is a stardust weapon." The voice was not loud, but Xenazoi heard it very clearly. She turned her right hand and held the vine tightly in her hand. She raised her mouth contemptuously and said, "9th level stardust weapon, vine demon, let me know." "What?" Li Ming shouted in surprise. 9th level stardust weapon. When these words were mentioned, the first thing Li Ming thought of was the chain demon, but the current chain demon no longer exists. But Li Ming is well aware of its power. If Li Ming had not used the wormhole summon forcefully on the alien planet, he might have died under the weapon. It is no exaggeration to say that the power of the 9th order stardust weapon is difficult to deal with even a 9th order high energy body like Li Ming. Looking at Xenazoi again at this time, Li Ming's heart was trembling slightly. He had to re-evaluate whether he was here to kill people and rob treasures or to give away his head. Now the balance of power has tilted towards Xenazoi, and Li Ming must prepare for the worst. At this time, Li Ming can also understand Xenazoi's previous attack behavior. In the previous battle, Xenazoi's attack with vines was completely the ability of this 9th order stardust weapon, just like Li Ming at the beginning. After Li Ming possessed the chain demon, he used the ability of the chain demon many times to suppress the enemy, and there was no need to take out the chain demon. This behavior needs to be based on the complete fusion of consciousness and weapons. Obviously, Xenazoi in front of him has reached this point. It's really rare. You are the only one in the outer system who let me take out the 9th level of the vine demon. This will be a good experience for you, Xenazoi said coldly. Li Ming opened his eyes wide and replied fiercely, "Experience your sister." As he said this, the energy on Li Ming's body surged again, but before Li Ming could do anything, Zenazoi waved his right hand and swung the vine quickly. The slender vine flashed and came, like a whip, as if it was going to wrap around Li Ming. Although Li Ming noticed it in advance, he was too late to dodge. The golden light flashed around his body, and golden shields emerged layer by layer. 3 layers of golden light shields surrounded Li Ming in the middle. Even the outermost golden light shield was 5 meters away from Li Ming's body. After the vine shook, it tightly wrapped around the outermost golden light shield. The golden shield is the ability of Li Ming's magic shield. It is infused with powerful energy. Even the 9th level Stardust weapon cannot destroy it at once. However, within a few seconds, after wrapping the golden shield, Li Ming's face immediately became ugly. This purple vine demon has the ability to absorb energy. The golden shield can still resist firmly at first, but soon the golden light weakens, and the energy is quickly absorbed. Snap like glass, the golden shield shattered directly, and the vine shrank and came to the 2nd layer of golden shield. Li Ming was a little uneasy. In this way, any of his defense and attack would be ineffective. Li Ming was still worried about this. Snap, another sound was heard, and the golden light of the 2nd layer also shattered and disappeared. Seeing this scene, Li Ming did not stay any longer. He stood up and jumped, leaving the golden shield in place, and his figure flew directly into the air. Li Ming had just jumped out, and another vine suddenly grew out of the vine that was originally wrapped around the golden shield. This newly grown vine was like a branch, but the speed was extremely fast. It completely wrapped Li Ming's body in a flash. This was no longer within the range of foreseeable avoidance. The branches entangled Li Ming, and the main vine crushed the remaining golden shield after shrinking. Looking at Li Ming, who was entangled, Zenazoi gently waved his hand, and the vine was thrown to the ground. A loud boom sounded, as if a whip was whipping the ground. Gravel flew, dust and smoke floated, and a deep pit appeared on the ground. At this time, the vine was slowly retracted. Zenazoi smiled with satisfaction, and walked towards the big pit. However, after taking a few steps, his figure suddenly paused, and the grey light on his body suddenly flickered and trembled. This grey light was the protective suit against the planet's poisonous gas. The flashing at this time was that the protective suit had reached its limit and needed to be replaced. After Zenazoi paused for a while, he turned his right hand, and a grey bead appeared in his hand. Chapter 279, Battle of the Isolated Island. Whoosh was heard, and a white light flashed before his eyes. Then he saw the grey bead in his hand shattered into starlight and disappeared in the air. The white light just now was an arc of electricity, which hit the grey bead with super fast speed and precision like a bullet, causing the bead to shatter and disappear instantly. Zenazoi turned his eyes and looked at the deep pit in front of him, from which Li Ming slowly walked out. At this time, Li Ming had shed his Dina appearance and returned to his human appearance because the camouflage drug had ended. Looking at Li Ming's new look, Zenazoi's eyes swayed up and down, and he said, "It seems that this is your true appearance." Li Ming took a deep breath, then slowly exhaled, and said, "It's great to be back to myself. The oxygen here is so abundant." The protective suit on Li Ming's body had also disappeared, but the so-called poison gas here made Li Ming feel very comfortable. The so-called poison gas is actually high-density oxygen. Oxygen with strong oxidizing effect is the most deadly poison gas for aliens. Not only aliens, but also those metal utensils and spacecraft will be quickly oxidized. In the universe, this kind of restraint is still very obvious. This is only carbon-based life. If it is silicon-based life, it basically cannot survive in such a place for a moment. However, advanced alien life has protective clothing and can also resist it. Just like humans entering space. Although they are both carbon-based life, the human physique has perfectly adapted to oxygen. Compared with aliens, it is a unique advantage in a specific environment. Xenozoi is also a carbon-based life. It cannot be said that it is completely adapted to oxygen, but it can also resist for a moment. It would be best if it has protective clothing. The protective clothing on his body is no longer stable, and a new protective clothing is needed to replace it. However, it is obvious that Li Ming will never give him this opportunity. Xenozoi has already seen this, and stared at Li Ming with his eyes. Does the poison gas not work on him? It's better to end the battle quickly. Xenazoi whispered secretly, thinking about the next battle strategy in his mind. Li Ming stared at the other party, and his wisdom eyes had already seen the other party's mind, but facing a 9th level stardust weapon, Li Ming did not have a complete way to deal with it. Even if he saw through it, he could do nothing. Taking a deep breath, Li Ming's mind once again recalled an ability, wormhole summoning. Li Ming still had some dark energy on him, which was collected from the alien planet. Although it was not much, it was enough for Li Ming. As for wormhole summoning, Li Ming had been studying it in depth since the last time he used it. Li Ming also understood some of the deep meanings of wormhole summoners. A wormhole summoner is to open a channel to another world, and then use consciousness to communicate with species in another world, summon them to the real world, and help oneself achieve the desired goal. It is indeed simple to say, but it is very complicated to execute. First of all, the opening and closing of the wormhole consumes its own energy and dark energy. Opening is relatively better, but closing is extremely complicated, and all dark energy must be consumed. This is actually not in line with common sense, but this is the ability that Li Ming learned from Encarnia, which once made Li Ming suspect that Encarnia's wormhole summoner ability was incomplete and flawed. Although he doubted, Li Ming had no better way to prove it. Therefore, in his subsequent practice, Li Ming only used the wormhole summoning skillfully. In other words, Li Ming only summoned the wormhole channel leading to the other world. As for the amount of dark energy, Li Ming could only use a small amount. Thinking of this in his mind, Li Ming couldn't help but whispered, "I can only try to use the wormhole summoning." As he said this, Li Ming also began to prepare for this, and Xenazoi, who had always wanted to kill Li Ming with one blow, was also eagerly preparing. But at the same time as the two began to fight, Moore's side had also entered a fierce battle. The 3 hunting beasts flew over from different angles, and their jumping bodies had invisibly surrounded Walker and Moore. In terms of size, Walker and Moore were far inferior to the hunting beasts, but Walker's face was full of confidence and he didn't seem to take the other party too seriously. Walker's eyes moved left and right, scanning the hunting beasts on both sides, and finally his eyes must have looked at the hunting beast in front of him. There was no fear in his calm eyes. He stared at the hunting beast in front of him, thinking about something in his mind. The body is divided into 3, and the energy of the body is also divided into 3. In other words, the strength of each one is only 1/3 of the original. If we only deal with one, we still have a chance of winning. This may be the most correct thing that idiot Moore has done. I can't care about him. Let's deal with one first. He said this in his mind, and his limbs exerted force. The grey figure shot out like a bullet. Because the speed was too fast, Moore, who was standing on Walker's back, didn't have time to react, and he felt his feet empty. He let out a scream of "ah," and was thrown off, and fell to the ground. Moore fell to the ground and was indignant. He opened his mouth and shouted, "Hey, don't leave me." When Moore was about to continue shouting, he suddenly stopped. His whole body was still in place as if frozen. His eyes slowly looked around in his eye sockets. The other 2 hunting beasts were already staring at Moore. A roar was heard, and the hunting beasts on both sides flashed and pounced on him. Suddenly, the sounds of goo goo, goo goo, ao kept coming. The 2 hunting beasts either slapped with their sharp claws, or opened their mouths to bite. For a while, dust and smoke flew in this area, and gravel splashed. Moore's figure and the 2 hunting beasts had gradually disappeared. Only the dust and smoke that continued to spread, the roar and the sound of grabbing the ground could be seen. While they were fighting here, Walker was also entangled. The silver blade light kept flashing in front of Walker, and sometimes a clang collision sound was made. Facing the agile and fast Walker, the hunting beasts could only be exhausted and unable to display their abilities. Walker's claws flashed around with his figure, sometimes up, sometimes down, sometimes left, sometimes right, without any rules or patterns, a series of crazy attacks. This kind of close combat is obviously not what the hunter beast is good at, so it can only wave its front claws to resist. After a few rounds, several blood marks appeared on the body of the hunter beast, and blood continued to flow along the wounds, which made the hunter beast angry. It stood up and jumped back, retreating to a distance. Walker did not chase. He just walked towards the opponent slowly, his eyes never left the hunter beast, and thought to himself, sure enough, close combat is the opponent's weakness. The angry hunter beast turned his eyes slightly, looked at the wound on his body, and suddenly opened his mouth, revealing sharp fangs. The green single eye on his forehead flashed slightly, and a green ball condensed out of his mouth. It aimed at Walker in the distance and sprayed. A flash of green light shot out. It seemed to be facing Walker, but Walker was calm and continued to move forward slowly. He twisted his body slightly, and the green light passed by Walker. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and the green light shot onto the ground beside him. Gravel splashed and exploded instantly. A small pit 1 meter long and wide appeared on the ground, but the whole pit turned green, and unknown green plants grew out of it. The hunter beast was immediately angry, and aimed its mouth at Walker again, only to hear the sound of swoosh, swoosh, swoosh continuously, and the green light shot out of the hunter beast's mouth like a bullet. From a distance, it looked like an automatic rifle. The green bullets kept stirring up dust and gravel on the ground, and green plants grew out of each crater. The green plants grew out of the dust and stopped growing after reaching more than 1 meter high. The dust also dissipated little by little. Walker's figure did not appear, and the hunter beast showed satisfaction. But in the next moment, in the smoke that was about to dissipate, a grey shadow suddenly shot out, as if it was ejected from the smoke. Before the hunter beast could react, Walker had already arrived in front of his face. His calm eyes were like a calm lake, and the corners of his mouth slightly raised, thinking to himself, a 9th level wild beast with only 1/3 of its strength is still too slow to react. The 2 front paws quickly stretched out, and the sharp blades popped out from the claws, aiming at the face of the hunter beast and scratching wildly. The blades flashed, and blood and flesh flew everywhere. The hunter beast used its 2 claws to try to tear Walker away from its eyes, while slowly retreating. But Walker was merciless at all, aiming at any attackable gap and scratching wildly, as if he wanted to tear the other party into pieces. For the hunter beast, this Walker was like an annoying fly, lingering, and unable to drive it away. The anger in his heart burned wildly. In annoyance, the hunter beast suddenly opened its mouth and roared again. The sound was deafening, and even the naked eye could see the sound waves. The sound waves blew Walker's body like a strong wind, and his grey hair kept floating. Under the sound waves, Walker stopped attacking, which made the hunter beast take a deep breath. However, as soon as the sound waves passed, Walker's calm eyes were like a mirror cast at the hunter beast. As soon as the hunter beast saw those eyes, it immediately realized what was going to happen next, but even if it knew it, it couldn't change it. Walker's figure flashed and pounced in front of the opponent's face again. Chapter 280, The Giant Beast's Stomach. The hunting beast could no longer tolerate Walker's attack, and jumped quickly, until it stopped on a tall rock. The hunting beast was panting, and its head was no longer the same as before, with bloodstains and wounds all over. It looked at Walker, as if he were a madman, and even when it looked at Walker lightly, it couldn't help but shrink. Under the roar of the hunting beast, the 2 hunting beasts that besieged Moore also stopped attacking. At this time, a large pit was formed on the ground after a series of scratches, and the hair of the hunting beast and Moore's feathers were scattered on the ground. But Moore was not hurt at all, and his whole body was flashing red light, and he was wrapped in a red phantom. Under the ability of Wukong, the 2 hunting beasts could not succeed at all, and could only breathe heavily, and look at Moore angrily. The hunting beast on the high rock had already seen the clues, and the green one-eyed green eye turned to look at the 2 hunting beasts beside Moore. The 2 beasts seemed to sense something, and they turned their heads and looked up, then ran over. The 3 hunting beasts gathered together again. 2 of them were covered in dust, and 1 was covered in wounds. Their previous proud and majestic appearance had completely disappeared. Walker couldn't help blinking as he watched this scene. He saw that the 3 hunting beasts on the high ground suddenly twisted and began to merge. After combining again, they were no longer the same as before. The body of the hunting beast twisted and became larger. Its head was still the same as before, but its body had changed from crawling to standing upright, like a bear. It was more than 10 meters high, and had already increased several times more than before. But at this moment, the ground suddenly trembled, as if the entire island was shaking, and their bodies became unstable. Walker and the hunting beasts looked at the distance at the same time. Li Ming and Xenozoi were also at a loss because of the violent shaking. They forced themselves to stabilize their bodies, but the shaking became more and more violent. "What's going on?" Li Ming said to himself, with a puzzled look on his face, but when he looked at Xenozoi opposite him, he found that she, like Li Ming, didn't know what happened. After a few seconds, the rocks under his feet began to crack suddenly. It was impossible to continue to stabilize his body standing on the ground at this time, because the violent shaking was beyond the body's tolerance. Li Ming frowned slightly, stood up and flew into the air, and Xenozoi did not dare to neglect it, and moved into the air. Both of them were more than 10 meters high in the air, and then looked down. The cracked rocks suddenly began to collapse, as if they were about to break, and sink into the seabed. The appearance of such a strange phenomenon made Li Ming and Xenozoi look in the direction of the meteorite spacecraft. If this island really sank into the sea, then the spacecraft would naturally be doomed. If there was no spacecraft, the possibility of leaving this place would be greatly reduced. Just as the two were paying attention to the spacecraft, the surrounding seawater suddenly whistled and rose to a height of dozens of meters. At the same time, two wall-like things rose rapidly from the seawater. The inner side of the wall was dark red, like a flesh wall. On the edges of the walls, there were rows of white serrated blades, like rows of teeth, each of which was huge. Li Ming's eyebrows gathered quickly, and he had already noticed something strange in his mind. He thought to himself, could this be? Just as Li Ming thought, this was a mouth of unknown origin. It could be a wild beast, a demon beast, or other beasts, but it was impossible to detect it in detail at the moment. No matter what it was, leaving here was the most urgent thing at the moment. As soon as this idea flashed through his mind, Li Ming's figure was startled. A strong suction came from below, and the entire island collapsed instantly. The rocks and seawater turned into a whirlpool and quickly went down. The walls on both sides had already soared into the sky, and the entire sky suddenly became dark, and the sunlight became smaller and smaller. It was this huge mouth that was closing. Li Ming tried to fly out of this place, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get rid of the suction below. He raised his head and could only watch the huge mouth close. The originally spacious sunlight could only disappear gradually in the gap between the giant beast's teeth. In just a few seconds, everything around him turned into darkness, without a trace of light. Li Ming's body could no longer resist the suction. The whole body seemed to be free falling, drifting in the seawater and rocks. However, Li Ming had condensed a magic shield on his body to protect his body from being damaged. He had no direction and didn't know where he was. He only felt that his body was shaking with the objects around him, as if he was thrown into a bottle, and then the bottle kept shaking. After a dizzy and violent collision, Li Ming's figure gradually stabilized. At this time, he was already in a closed space with red light everywhere. The smooth walls flashed a faint red light. This light was relatively soft, like a halo. There were tumors under his body, but these tumors were different from what Li Ming had seen before. They were like round crystal balls with a thin film on the surface. Li Ming was sitting on one of the tumors. This tumor was tens of meters long and wide, huge, and the thin film on the surface gave people a soft feeling and slightly reflected light. Li Ming stood up and looked around. With his eyes and his own consciousness, the surrounding environment suddenly became clear. There were 4 or 5 tumors like the one under Li Ming, and each was basically the same size. The previous rocks and seawater had settled to the bottom and basically disappeared. In this huge space, it was like being in another world, but it was all covered by a light red halo. Li Ming took a step forward, but just after taking a few steps, his whole body suddenly stopped. Li Ming frowned and looked down at the soles of his feet. There was nothing unusual about the thin films, but his body had changed. Li Ming raised his hands gently, looked at his left hand, then looked at his right hand, and his face began to look ugly. The energy in the body is dissipating little by little. Li Ming whispered to himself, and his eyes could not help but look around again. Fuck, no way, Li Ming said in fear. At this time, Li Ming had already noticed the changes that shocked him. From a distance, Li Ming's body was constantly emitting green smoke, like water vapor, as if a person's breath in the cold winter, visible to the naked eye. But if you look at the whole body, it's more like the flesh is evaporating little by little, and the steam is overflowing from every part of the body little by little. These steams do not disappear after leaving the body, but float into the air little by little, and are absorbed by the light red flesh walls around. All of this was seen by Li Ming, and his face instantly became ugly. His slightly narrowed eyes had already used the ability of wisdom eyes, and he said, the energy in the body is leaving little by little, and then absorbed by those flesh walls. So, this should be the stomach of a wild beast. Here, the energy will be drained and die. Li Ming looked at the light red flesh wall in the distance and whispered, and his frown was unable to stretch. Obviously, the current situation is very dangerous. Just as Li Ming was worried, a thick purple vine suddenly stretched out from the tumor below, like a sharp sword. However, the vine was not aimed at Li Ming, but stabbed at the flesh wall in the distance. Li Ming stood high and saw all this, but soon Li Ming's eyes widened a little, and a strange scene suddenly happened. The straight purple vine was about to touch the flesh wall, and suddenly a dent appeared on the surface. The scene was like throwing a green leaf into a fire. Before it got close to the flame, the leaf was wrinkled by the high temperature, and then dried up. The vine in front of him was exactly like this. As it got closer to the flesh wall, it became dry and weak, and its body bent and drooped downwards. Ah! Zenozo couldn't help but exclaimed, looking at the drooping vine with a shocked face, and pulled the vine back with his right hand. This scene was naturally seen by Li Ming. After his eyes turned slightly, he whispered, the 9th level Stardust weapon was instantly. Li Ming's eyes widened slightly, and at this moment, a muffled bang sound suddenly came from the sky above his head. The sound was not loud, but in this closed space, after reverberating through the 4 walls, the sound became very clear. Li Ming looked up, and forgot about the past. Zenozoi below also looked up, because the position of the tumor was not vertical, so the line of sight would not be greatly affected. I saw that on a tumor above, the hunter beast and walker were fighting again. Chapter 281 Endurance. The increase in size seemed to make the hunter beast more powerful, and its speed and strength were several times higher than before. The huge palm slapped Walker, but Walker dodged all the attacks by jumping around flexibly. But it seemed to be very stressful for Walker to maintain this situation, because the hunter beast was no longer the same as before, and every dodge for Walker was very thrilling. This dodge seemed to be clever and close, but it was also approaching the edge of danger. Under the violent siege of the hunter beast, Walker had to move closer to the flesh wall, but Li Ming had seen the power of the flesh wall before, which would directly drain the energy of the object. His eyebrows jumped, and Li Ming's expression tightened, thinking, not good. With a force on his feet, Li Ming's figure flew away like an arrow, his body flew into the air, and the palm of his right hand was already shining with white light, and the arc jumped. Swoosh bang. The electric arc shot out, and in just a flash it hit the hunter beast. With a violent sound, the hunter beast that was attacking was knocked away by the electromagnetic wave. Li Ming saw this, and jumped onto the tumor. As soon as he saw Li Ming, Walker ran over quickly, and the hunter beast had already hit the flesh wall fiercely. Ah! With a scream, the hunter beast looked at Li Ming fiercely. Because the electromagnetic wave just now was temporarily condensed, it did not inject too much energy, so the power did not reach the extreme, but only left a black burn mark on the body of the hunter beast. After Li Ming stood firm, he looked at the hunter beast fiercely with his eyes. At this time, Walker jumped to Li Ming's shoulder. The angry hunter beast bared his teeth, and became even more angry, because of Li Ming's attack. His eyes were full of anger, but just when the hunter beast was about to do something, his body suddenly stopped. As if the body was stuck to the flesh wall, the body tried to move, but it couldn't move away. Ah! The hunting beast turned around in surprise, only to see that its body was gradually merging into the flesh wall. A powerful force made the hunting beast unable to resist at all. Its frightened eyes suddenly widened and became round. At this time, the hunting beast could no longer remain calm, and it didn't care about Li Ming. It kept making various screams, and its limbs frantically scratched and kicked to break free. However, no matter how it struggled, it couldn't get rid of the restraints, and could only be swallowed up bit by bit. There was a light sound of footsteps landing on the ground. Li Ming turned his head cautiously, and saw that it was Zenozoi, but the other party had no intention of attacking Li Ming. Instead, it looked at the hunting beast on the cave wall in the distance. The complex eyes were full of strange colors, but revealed a bit of coldness. Upon seeing its master, the hunter beast roared even more heartbreakingly, and its eyes kept looking at Xenozoi, full of desire and hope, but under Xenozoi's cold expression, those seemed pale and powerless. After a few seconds, the hunter beast had completely disappeared, and the surface of the cave wall returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Xenozoi turned his head slightly, and looked at Li Ming. Li Ming also turned to look at him. The two of them still had their own anger in their eyes, but Li Ming's keen eyes had already noticed Xenozoi's thoughts. After a shallow smile, he said, "We are now in the stomach of this huge wild beast. The energy in our bodies is decreasing all the time. It won't be long before you and I will die here. In this case, you won't still want to waste energy to continue fighting with me," Li Ming said very casually. Xenozoi rolled his eyes, glanced at Li Ming coldly, turned around and jumped away from the tumor. Li Ming snorted, glanced at the other party, and then sat down on the spot. His eyes never left Xenozoi. He had to be cautious. Xenozoi was on the tumor opposite Li Ming, and the distance between them was also very large. In this way, as long as one of them had any ill intentions, the other party would naturally find out immediately. Through his wise eyes, Li Ming learned that Xenozoi really had no intention of continuing to fight. This was the same as what Li Ming thought. The most important thing now was to maintain the energy in the body and survive. As long as the energy was not completely extracted by the surrounding flesh walls, it could survive. In other words, the most important thing at this time was to see who had more recovery pills. Nebula pill was undoubtedly the first choice of pill. In terms of the absorption speed of the flesh walls, ordinary energy supply could not meet it at all. The energy in life was actually consumed all the time, and as long as life was alive, the consumption would not stop. If there was another fight, the energy consumption would naturally increase. Whether it was electromagnetic waves or other abilities, they were all made of energy. The current situation is no less than the consumption in a battle, because the energy in the body is evaporating from the body at a speed visible to the naked eye. This speed is very scary. That's why Xenozoi gave up the fight. Li Ming looked at Walker on his shoulder and whispered, "Go find more." Walker nodded slightly, turned around and left Li Ming. Walker's sudden departure also attracted Xenozoi's attention. His eyes suddenly looked at Li Ming, and his expression was instantly tense. But after seeing Li Ming's calm expression, he slowly relaxed. The body is still, which is the bottom line of energy consumption. Li Ming and Xenozoi both sat cross-legged on the ground motionless. There is no doubt that whether they can survive depends on their own belongings. After a while, Walker's grey figure jumped up from below, and on his back was Moore, but now Moore was like a drowned chicken, wet all over. Cough cough. Moore coughed hard a few times, shook his wings, shook off the seawater on his body, and then widened his eyes. Huh. That guy. Moore saw Xenozoi on the tumor opposite. Li Ming glanced at Moore, and said with consciousness, "If you want to live, stay still." Moore paused and rolled his eyes. He glanced at Li Ming, and then stabilized his mind and stopped talking. In the following time, it was relatively quiet and peaceful. There was no distinction between day and night, no concept of time. The only thing he knew was the amount of energy in his body. To ensure the energy in his body was to ensure his own survival. Li Ming had a lot of nebula pills on his body, and he was very confident about this. However, Li Ming also had to be reserved and try not to show it, because according to the information detected by the wisdom eye, Xenozoi was also very confident. Both of them believed that they could easily outlast each other in this environment. Even if they fought, the two sides were evenly matched. At this time, endurance was obviously more in line with the current situation. Xenozoi had 3 nebula pills on her body, which was relatively large, so she was full of confidence. However, Li Ming had more than 10 times more on him. Apart from the number on Inkinaya, Li Ming also got about 40 pills at Dallas camp. In addition, he got 2 extra star capsules and 5 or 6 star bags. In terms of volume, Li Ming had 3 star capsules on his body, one of which was his own, one of which was Dallas' own, and the last one was traded to Dali by the 7 star systems. Let's not talk about Li Ming's own star capsule for now. The 2 star capsules of Dali and the 7 star systems alone are a considerable fortune. Dali is a businessman, so there are naturally a lot of precious things in his star capsules, but Li Ming has not taken a closer look. Besides, the star capsules of the 7 star systems are all rich resources and materials. To put it another way, even if Li Ming doesn't have enough nebula pills on him, he can refine some immediately. Under such conditions, why would Li Ming worry? However, Li Ming had to hide his wealth as much as possible. If the other party knew, or felt that he had so many things, the other party would fight for it, even if he had to die. Therefore, Li Ming showed an attitude that he could not hold on. Li Ming's worries were all written on his face. His eyes were weak, his expression was pale, and even his breathing rhythm was slowed down a lot. People felt that this person seemed to be dying. Although those were all pretended, they made people feel very real after watching them. Xenozoi on the opposite side saw all of this, and could not help but secretly rejoice. She smiled coldly and snorted secretly, wishing that Li Ming's nebula would be shattered immediately, because of the loss of energy. He only knew that the energy was being consumed. When it was almost consumed, he would take a nebula pill, and so on. In addition to Li Ming himself, Li Ming would also take out pills to supply Moore and Walker. Chapter 282, that's it. Moore and Walker's energy consumption was relatively low, accounting for only 1/3 of Li Ming's. After Li Ming took 3 pills, the 2 beasts took 1 pill, which was relatively economical. Xenozoi on the opposite side kept looking at Li Ming. After taking the first nebula pill, Xenozoi began to pay attention to Li Ming, but Li Ming still looked powerless, weak and exhausted, as if he would not be able to hold on at any time. But after all 3 nebula pills were used up, Li Ming still looked exhausted and extremely weak, which made Xenozoi very puzzled, but he could not understand it. According to the cycle of the Chaos Galaxy, the two had been here for 3 months. Li Ming had not changed at all from beginning to end, and he had always been weak and dying, but Xenozoi had changed a lot. In the first month, he was still full of energy. In the second month, he was a little tired, and in the third month, he was pale and weak. The nebula pill had been used up, and Xenozoi could only rely on absorbing the nebula power or kundalini in her body to maintain herself, but this energy body absorbed slowly, and could not meet the body's consumption at all, and the absorption speed of the flesh wall was not reduced at all. At this time, looking at Li Ming again, his face was ruddy, his expression was vigorous, and he was actually much more energetic. What's wrong with this guy? He was dying at the beginning, but why is he so energetic now? Xenozoi whispered to herself, and her tone was already a little powerless. Of course, Li Ming in the distance could see clearly through his wisdom eyes that Xenozoi had run out of ammunition and food, and had no nebula pill, so there was no need for him to pretend. In this way, another month passed. Xenozoi had begun to be dazed, and his vision was unclear, but looking at the opposite side, Li Ming's expression had not changed, and he was full of energy. Not only Li Ming, but even the 2 star beasts, Moore and Walker, were alive and kicking. Impossible. This guy. Could it be? Could it be that he did it on purpose at the beginning? Xenozoi said breathlessly. With the excessive consumption of energy in his body, Xenozoi has indeed reached his limit. The energy in his body is being drained bit by bit. Death is just a matter of time. At this moment, Li Ming moved his body, stood up from the ground, stared at Xenozoi with his eyes, and slowly raised his right hand. His index finger stretched out, and the electric light flashed. An electromagnetic wave had condensed on the fingertips. As soon as this action appeared, Xenozoi in the distance suddenly opened his eyes a little wider, and his expression became serious. How? Impossible. He was secretly shocked in his mind. But the next moment, white light flashed, and the small electromagnetic wave shot out of his hand, and flashed to him. Bang! Blood splashed out of his chest, and the electromagnetic wave hit Xenozoi's chest. Xenozoi was powerless to dodge, and could only grit his teeth tightly, looking at Li Ming in disbelief. Li Ming's it was exactly what he saw with his keen eyes. Xenozoi, it's no longer possible. The corners of his mouth lifted up, revealing a satisfied smile. His body slowly floated to the tumor where Xenozoi was. Looking at Xenozoi sitting quietly on the ground, Li Ming made a sound of tsk tsk tsk. He leaned over and half crouched, shook his head gently, looked at the other party with his eyes, and said, "That's it, alien friend. As he spoke, a group of green light phantoms slowly floated out from Li Ming's body. The phantom was like a group of smoke and soon wrapped Xenozoi up. Then 3 star bags and a 1-foot-long vine floated out from Xenozoi's body. Li Ming raised his hand, and the vine and star bag fell into Li Ming's palm under the wrapping of the green light phantom. Xenozoi could only watch Li Ming's operations with a weak consciousness and had no way to do anything. With the vine and star bag in hand, Li Ming's eyes returned to Xenozoi. His expression did not change much. After a light hum, he gently raised his left hand, and a force swung out along his left hand. This force did not have destructive power, but only came with a strong thrust. Xenozoi's body was like being pushed by the vacuum force, and her body involuntarily moved backwards until it stopped at the flesh wall. The flesh wall was still the same as before, swallowing Xenozoi into it bit by bit. Seeing Xenozoi completely disappear, Li Ming breathed a sigh of relief and turned his eyes to look at the 3 star bags in his hand. The first thing that caught his eye was the vine. There was no doubt that this thing was the 9th level Stardust weapon, the Vine Demon. Li Ming gently placed it on the ground beside him. As long as he spent some time refining it with his consciousness, this weapon would belong to Li Ming. As for the 3 star bags, Li Ming still had to check them carefully. He raised his right hand to the air, and all the contents of the 3 star bags emerged. The first was a light blue flowing cloud body, which was like blue water. It was full of sesame-sized starlight, shaped like leaves, the size of a palm, and flowing in an irregular manner. Li Ming looked at it intently and immediately opened his eyes a few points, blurting out, "This is the power of flowing clouds." As he spoke, his eyes were fixed on this thing without blinking. The power of the flowing cloud is like a flowing nebula, and the starlight inside is like a bunch of energy planets. If the universe is a forest, then it is just a leaf inside. But as long as the consciousness is injected into it, the mystery inside can be discovered, as if one is in a star system, and those planets, those stardust, those flowing meteorites are all under control. This power is daunting, pleasing to the eye, and even more desirable. Li Ming shook his head slightly, and said to himself, "Fuck, it's really beautiful. There are such wonderful things in the universe, tut tut tut." He muttered in his mouth, but his eyes were still reluctant to leave this thing. After watching for a while, Li Ming's eyes turned to the next thing. The whole thing is light yellow, like a plate, and it is only the size of the palm. Li Ming has never seen it before, but he feels that there seems to be a shadow of this thing in his cognition. His eyes narrowed slightly, and the ability of wisdom eyes was activated. After a closer look, Li Ming laughed out loud. "So, this is Huayu," Li Ming muttered to himself, his face full of excitement. Huayu and Xingaiao are similar. Both are items that assist in advancement, but Huayu's ability is more powerful, far from being comparable to Xingaiao. It looks like a plate, and the whole is light yellow. I don't know what material it is made of. It gives people a mysterious atmosphere. I can't see anything unusual under my consciousness, but I can sense the vortex-like energy in it. Although it looks ordinary, it is extremely rare. After a satisfied smile, Li Ming looked at the next item again, Beigi. This item is not so rare overall, because Li Ming already has one, which is a must for synthesizing nebula power. The Beigi in front of him is no different from the Beigi on Li Ming's body. His eyes turned back and looked at the next thing. As soon as he saw this thing, Li Ming frowned slightly. Judging from the shape and color outside, Li Ming had no knowledge of this thing at all. It is the size of an egg, flat and brown in color, like a pebble. There are many golden symbols and marks on the surface, flashing with golden light, which is extremely weird. What is this? Li Ming thought that he had never seen this thing before, so he felt very strange. He raised his right hand and touched his chin. After thinking for a while, his eyes narrowed slightly, and the black eyeballs turned into golden water droplets after a while in the eye sockets. Then, his mind entered into it. With his own cognition and consciousness, the information about this thing gradually became clear. This, huh? Exclamation mark. Li Ming's eyes suddenly widened a little, and the muscles under his eyes twitched slightly. He had already recognized this thing, and whispered to himself, "Star map key." After reading these 3 words, Li Ming fell into deep thought. His face was full of worry, and he could not calm down for a long time. The information about the star map key kept emerging in Li Ming's mind. The star map key is the master of important star system institutions. To talk about the star map key, we must first talk about the star system institutions. Star system institutions are exclusive regional institutions owned by advanced civilizations. The closer to the center of the Milky Way, the fewer civilized creatures there are, but the higher the level of civilization. Although there are many star systems, most of them are lifeless. Chapter 283 Sawtooth Beast. Advanced civilizations will place some dangerous institutions in a separate star system, such as destructive weapons, high-end experiments, prisons, etc. The star map key is the main item of the institution that controls a star system, because these star systems are generally dangerous, and it is very difficult to enter and exit. Even the safety coordinates are constantly changing with the surrounding environment. Simply put, the safety coordinates for entering the star system this time will change next time. The star map key is the key item to calculate these changes. Only with the star map key can you enter the star system according to the calculated changes. Each star map key only corresponds to a fixed star system, and the star map key in Li Ming's hand has this function. Li Ming's eyes are focused, staring at the star map key seriously, and he gradually whispered, "Croft star system. Delano star." The images of the star system controlled by this star map key have emerged one after another. This is a star system that spans the outer system and the middle system, and is also in a complex planetary belt. It can be said to be an extremely dangerous star system. The Croft galaxy is the third largest prison system in the central system. It holds extremely dangerous people. To enter or leave this system, you need a star map key, otherwise you will face great risks. The detailed information about Croft Prison is naturally recorded in the star map key, but Li Ming has no intention of checking these. Li Ming has no idea why this item appears on Xenozoi, but for now, this item does not seem to be of much use to Li Ming. With a wave of his right hand, Li Ming put away all the things he had seen before, including the star map key he had just seen. In addition to these things, there was only a star bag in front of Li Ming, and this was all the things on Xenozoi. In the end, this star bag did not have anything eye-catching. In addition to a dozen nebula powers, there were some materials and a star certification. This star certification might be the only thing in the star bag that attracted Li Ming, but for now, it was not too important to Li Ming, and he had no time to watch it. Now Li Ming can be said to have finally achieved his goal. He has obtained everything he wanted. At the same time, Li Ming is also facing a new problem: how to leave. This is a difficult problem, and Li Ming has no solution to it. While thinking about the solution, Li Ming can only rely on the nebula pill to maintain it. Moore and Walker were taken back to the beast cloud habitat by Li Ming, and Li Ming would continue to supply them with the nebula pill they needed. As for Li Ming himself, he sat cross-legged on the ground, closed his eyes, and concentrated to reduce energy consumption. Li Ming was sitting in meditation, but a war was happening in the outside world. The vast sea surface was endless, the wind was raging, the seawater was constantly churning in the sea breeze, and the waves of more than 10 meters high rose and fell one after another. At this time, any objects floating on the sea surface would be swallowed by the waves. But deep underwater, 100 meters deep, a huge wild beast was swimming slowly. This beast was extremely huge, 5 or 6 kilometers long, and the height of its head reached 100 meters. It can be said that on the parallel ground, only standing on the roof of a 33-story building, can you see the top of the beast's head. As for its length, it is like a main street in the city that has no end at a glance. Such a huge monster will cause huge impact and damage to a certain area every time it moves. This beast looks like a catfish, but in addition to the fins, there are many serrated bone spurs on both sides of the body, like a swimming saw. However, on the opposite side of the sawtooth beast, another huge figure is rushing here. The size of this giant beast is only half of the sawtooth beast. The back half of the body is flat and has a gray segmented exoskeleton, while the front half is relatively wide, like a crab. It looks hard. 2 claws extend from the front of this beast. The tip of one claw is a bone blade, which is extremely sharp. The tip of the other claw is 3 long soft tissues, like 3 fingers, but these fingers are a bit like octopus tentacles. The 2 giant beasts have already sensed the existence of each other, and a fierce battle seems to be inevitable. These beasts can be classified as wild beasts, but huge bodies are very rare and can only be formed on specific planets and in special environments. Each wild beast has its own territory to ensure its survival. Compared with other wild beasts, the sawtooth beast is relatively lucky recently because after swallowing an island, it has not eaten for 4 months. This is mainly because the island swallowed that time provided it with enough energy. But not eating will lead to the birth of more energy bodies in the area it controls. These new energy bodies should be its food, but its stopping of eating also leads to the accumulation of these new energy bodies. Compared with the wild beasts in other areas that are still hungry, this is undoubtedly worth the risk. Not all wild beasts are as lucky as the sawtooth beast. The crab beast in front of him came just for the rich energy body. The two wild beasts kept approaching, and the battle was about to break out, just like the sea level being swept by the sea breeze. After a while, the distance between the two wild beasts was less than 100 meters. Seeing the intruder, the sawtooth beast became angry, swam over quickly with a swing of its body. The crab beast on the opposite side also swung its tail and rushed over here. In the blink of an eye, the two wild beasts had already collided with each other. The sawtooth beast opened its huge mouth and bit directly at the other. Faced with the amazing bite force, the crab beast quickly swung its body to avoid it and stretched out a claw at the same time. The 3 finger-like tentacles immediately wrapped around the sawtooth beast's head, and at the same time, the other bone blade claw was ready to attack. The sawtooth beast suddenly swung its body violently, and the saw teeth on the side of its body accidentally became the best weapon. The sound of bang bang was heard in the sea water. The sawtooth beast used the saw teeth on the side to attack the crab beast. The violent collision made the crab beast unable to bear it, and the hard shell on its body surface began to crack slightly. Despite this, the 3 fingers did not relax at all, and still held the sawtooth beast's head tightly. The sound of bang 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 continued to be heard. The crab beast was obviously unable to hold on. The hard shell on its body surface had broken, and many fragments fell from its body, which was caused by the collision of the sawtooth beast. The sawtooth beast was about to defeat the crab beast, but at this moment, the crab beast's claws with bone blades suddenly began to attack fiercely. Swish, swish, swish. It was like someone holding a dagger and stabbing each other frantically. This also caused the fight between the two beasts to be like a round-based system. First, the sawtooth beast collided, and then the crab beast's bone blade counterattacked. After a series of attacks, the sawtooth beast suddenly began to swing its body violently. Bright red blood overflowed from the sawtooth beast's body and spread in the sea water. The crab beast's bone blade had pierced the sawtooth beast's body in many places during the crazy attack, and the blood was flowing out from those wounds. With the surge of blood, Li Ming was also greatly affected at this moment, because Li Ming was in the sawtooth beast's stomach. Under the random stabbing of the bone blade just now, one of them pierced the sawtooth beast's stomach, and blood quickly flowed in the stomach. Li Ming opened his eyes wide, bright red blood surged under his body. After being damaged, the flesh wall actually lost its ability to absorb energy. This was a good surprise for Li Ming. The green smoke that was still coming out of his body had stopped. Energy was no longer being absorbed. Li Ming noticed it immediately, just like his own breathing, which was very difficult before, but now it is very smooth. His eyes turned, and his wisdom eyes swept around. The location of the wound had been confirmed by Li Ming, and the blood was still increasing in the stomach. A white light flashed on the body surface, and the electric armor had wrapped the body. Then, seeing the direction of the blood flow, he suddenly exerted force on his feet and flew over. His vision was covered with blood, and Li Ming slowly moved forward in the flesh and blood. However, the distance from the stomach to the outside of the sawtooth beast was dozens of meters, and there were other organs, tissues, blood vessels, etc. in the middle. It was not so easy to get outside smoothly. The most important thing was that the body of the sawtooth beast was still swinging, which also had a certain impact on the wound. Every time the body was bent, the wound would close and form a squeezing force, but when the body was straightened again, the wound would recover. This caused Li Ming to fluctuate with each bending and squeezing of the sawtooth beast. When Li Ming came to his senses, he had already lost his way. Fuck! Li Ming shouted, because of the bending of the sawtooth beast's body. However, the sawtooth beast was controlled by the 3 fingers of the crab beast at this time, making it like a fish on the hook, swinging its body wildly. This also made Li Ming curse in his wound. Fuck. 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 Your uncle. Fuck. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 284. I'm finally out. A puff of green smoke came out of the wound of the sawtooth beast, just like water evaporated when it met fire. Li Ming's whole body began to release a large amount of electrical energy, and the light and high temperature fermented in the wound. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and the flesh and blood flew across the wound, just like a bomb exploded in the body of the sawtooth beast. The blood and minced meat immediately filled a large area of seawater, and Li Ming was mixed in this flesh and blood. Through the powerful electromagnetic energy, Li Ming opened a way out for himself. As soon as he returned to the sea, Li Ming quickly swam upwards. His eyes swept around and saw the battle between the 2 wild beasts. In Li Ming's eyes, the scale of this battle was unimaginable. At this time, Li Ming just wanted to leave the sea quickly. However, before Li Ming swam far, the sawtooth beast suddenly swam its body again. Such a huge beast, a slight movement would form a huge wave. As its body swam, the water flow continued to spread around, and Li Ming was instantly pushed away by the water flow like a fallen leaf in the wind. Li Ming drifted with the waves in the sea, unable to control his body at all. He could only use energy to protect his body as much as possible. After an unknown amount of time, Li Ming finally came to the surface of the sea, after drifting in the sea water. With the powerful energy, Li Ming broke free from the seawater and flew directly into the sky. At this time, the sea breeze was still whistling and the seawater was churning, but Li Ming, who was back in the air, was no longer affected by these. The feeling of regaining freedom made Li Ming very excited. Ha 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 ha. I finally got out. Li Ming shouted excitedly, but before his smile faded, Mo's voice suddenly rang in his ears. Yeah, that's great. I thought I would die in there. So, how should we leave this planet? Mo's sudden words made Li Ming's smile disappear immediately. He remembered that he was still on the silent sacrifice star. If there was no spaceship, he might have to stay here forever. Yes, I don't want to stay here forever on this planet without civilization. Li Ming suddenly realized, and his eyes turned and looked at the sea below again. With narrowed eyes, he stared at the bottom without moving, thinking of countermeasures in his mind. First of all, it is certain that the meteorite spaceship was swallowed by the sawtooth beast together with himself, but Li Ming did not look for the whereabouts of the spaceship in the stomach, and Li Ming stayed in it for 4 months. The spaceship might have been excreted as feces. Of course, it is also possible that it is still in the belly of the sawtooth beast. Regardless of whether it is there or not, it is naturally unrealistic to look for it at this time. The beast's random movement in the water is enough to prevent Li Ming from getting close. With such a huge body, it is not easy to kill it. Whether it can find the meteorite spaceship is another matter. After some thinking, Li Ming decided to give up the search and turned to fly away. The whereabouts of the meteorite spaceship are unknown. Let's go around this planet first, whispered Li Ming in the dark, and began to fly along the sea. The vast ocean was endless. Li Ming, who was flying slowly in the air, gathered the ability of his wisdom eyes. Finding land was very important to Li Ming. According to the information he had obtained, there was no civilization or wild beasts on the Star of Silence. But now, the giant wild beast in the sea proved that this news was obviously not true. In this way, the necessity of exploration became even more important. Li Ming continued to fly in the air. His eyes had determined the direction. In his deep eyes, Li Ming saw a black spot on the sea level. His eyes widened slightly, and he smiled slightly, whispering, "It seems that there is land over there." As he spoke, Li Ming increased his flying speed, but as he flew, Li Ming's face suddenly changed slightly, and the flying speed suddenly slowed down a lot. In his wisdom eyes, the black spot had already moved away from the sea surface. Only then did he see clearly that the black spot was not land at all, but something floating above the sea surface. Because the distance was still far, even with his wisdom eyes, he couldn't see it clearly. He muttered, "What on earth is that?" Thinking about it, he snorted and flew directly to that direction. That direction was the direction Li Ming had been flying. No matter what it was, he went to see it first. After flying for a while, Li Ming's eyes could clearly see the black spot. It turned out to be a giant strange bird. It was so huge that it was hard to imagine. Even the sawtooth beast was 3 or 4 times smaller than it. Such a huge beast made Li Ming suddenly stop and float in the air motionless. His body was slightly startled, his eyes widened a little, his mouth opened slightly, his tongue was not lowered, and his heart could not calm down for a long time. This TMD, it's too big. Such a sentence popped out of Li Ming's mind. The surprised expression in the dull eyes. There is no doubt that this is the largest beast Li Ming has ever seen. This size is even larger than some large spaceships. If Li Ming were to fight this huge beast, even if the other party stood still, Li Ming might have to attack for a long time before it would be effective. Of course, the other party would not take Li Ming, a tiny creature, seriously and had no interest in him. This beast looked somewhat similar to a pterosaur, but the difference was that this beast had feathers and a pair of sharp claws, and its huge mouth was tightly closed, soaring slowly in the air. Li Ming looked up at the beast, and his body had already stood still. In Li Ming's beast family illustrations, there was no record of this kind of beast. Obviously, this was an existence that the Earth core civilization had never known. As he looked at it, he had some other ideas in his mind, and he couldn't help muttering, "This kind of giant beast, judging from its appearance, it is definitely not a creature that lives on the sea. Just follow it, maybe we can find land." As he muttered to himself, Li Ming smiled slightly and moved his body, flying straight towards the beast. Compared with the giant beast, Li Ming's figure is like an ant compared to a human, tiny and insignificant. Li Ming looked at the giant beast in front of him, and his figure kept approaching until he was above the beast, and then he landed gently and came to a place with fewer feathers. It was like a piece of open space on the land, but it was a little bumpy. His feet stepped on the hard flesh, and he looked around, and then he noticed something unusual. After taking a deep breath, he said to himself, "This place is actually a healed wound." Under his wise eyes, the area under his feet and the skin around him have formed a sharp contrast. This piece of open space without feathers is a healed wound, but the wound is huge, which is really shocking. The strong wind kept blowing the feathers around him. Li Ming sat down on the spot. Now he just needed to wait quietly, and the giant beast under him undoubtedly became Li Ming's means of transportation. Li Ming's side was temporarily stable, and he could only rely on luck to see if he could find a way to leave the silent sacrifice star. In the space of the silent sacrifice star, a silver round spaceship had been wandering for several months. This round spaceship was Adriana's spaceship. In the main cabin, Adriana looked at the control panel in front of her, just like looking at a mirror. The information on the control panel flashed, and the entire silent sacrifice star was slightly rotating on it like a crystal ball. Nito's signal is on the silent sacrifice star. Is that kid alive or dead? Adriana couldn't find the answer on her hesitant face, and she was also in hesitation. She looked at the control panel with her eyes, but there was no movement. Adriana knew the information of the silent sacrifice star. If aliens stayed on it for a long time, they would inevitably be oxidized by oxygen and eventually die. Not only life, but also spacecraft is no exception. However, under the observation of the control panel, Nito's signal kept moving. Therefore, it was difficult to tell whether Li Ming was alive or dead. Facing this artifact, Adriana didn't want to give up easily. She stared at the signal on the control panel and fell into silence. There was a stalemate here. More than a dozen giant spaceships at the edge of the distant Milky Way were being collectively transmitted. This direction was from the Canis Major galaxy. These spaceships are of different sizes, like a joint fleet of multiple civilizations. In the dark universe, they are not conspicuous, and the surface of the spaceships is constantly flowing with light, which is extremely strange. Chapter 285, Strange Crystal Block. On the Star of Silence, Li Ming was still sitting cross-legged on the giant bird. It was unknown how long it had been since day and night. The giant bird under him was flying continuously, as if it was migrating. During this period of time, Li Ming was not idle either. The vine demon that he had just obtained, the 9th level stardust weapon, had been refined by Li Ming. The 1-foot-long vine was constantly shaking in front of Li Ming. With his powerful mental ability, this weapon now belonged to Li Ming. In addition to this 9th level stardust weapon, there were 2 other things that also aroused Li Ming's interest in his spare time. One was the star class in Xenozoi's star bag, and the other was the star capsule obtained from Dali. As a businessman, Dali must have a lot of precious items in his star capsule. He had no time to look at it before, but now that he was so leisurely, he might as well take it out and see what it was. Star class and star capsule. Li Ming still checked the star class first. Holding the black star class stone in his hand, his mind under his wisdom eyes had completely entered it. Advanced star class of biological civilization. Beast King star class. Star classification mainly includes a variety of abilities such as taming, strengthening, evolution, and mutation. Of course, there is no need to say much about taming, which is to tame the beasts and make them obey you. However, advanced taming is obviously different from the taming content that Li Ming saw on Fuller Star before. Here, not only wild beasts can be tamed, but even magic beasts can be tamed, and they can be tamed across levels. In other words, an 8th level civilized creature can also tame a 9th level wild beast or magic beast, which is really powerful. The next is strengthening, evolution, and mutation. These abilities are auxiliary abilities, mainly used on already tamed beasts, to make the already tamed beasts become more powerful. These abilities are obviously extraordinary, but Li Ming's expression is relatively indifferent, without much change, and he seems to have no interest in this aspect. However, mastering an ability means having one more means, and Li Ming will not reject it. He put away the star class and took out a star capsule. This star capsule is Dali's star capsule. Li Ming held the star capsule with his hand, and a ball of green light had already wrapped it up. During the induction, Li Ming's face was gloomy and uncertain, sometimes surprised, sometimes excited, and sometimes puzzled. Because there were indeed too many things in Dali's star capsule. Some of these things were advanced scientific and technological products, some were rare materials, and some were things that Li Ming did not understand. For Li Ming in his current situation, there was one thing in it that caught Li Ming's attention. Capsule technology, capsule spaceship. Li Ming couldn't help but whispered. His eyes sank slightly, and his eyes looked at the star capsule more intently. Capsule technology is the technology of advanced scientific and technological civilization, all-encompassing and very powerful. Simply put, it is to use advanced technology to reduce some relatively large items to the size of a capsule, which is not only convenient to carry, but also very practical. Capsule spaceship is one of them. Li Ming stood up excitedly, clenched his right hand, and a blue light flashed in his hand. The star capsule had disappeared, and instead, a small silver iron rod was replaced. It was not long and wide, but the silver light flashing on the surface gave people a full sense of technology. Li Ming looked at the object with his eyes, and gently extended his right hand into the air, as if he was releasing a butterfly that had landed on his hand. After this action, the silver capsule floated up until it reached the sky above Li Ming's head. The sound of sizzling continued to ring, and flashing white light emanated from the surface of the silver capsule, as if something was seeping out from inside. Li Ming was watching carefully, and the next second, a white light suddenly shone brightly, just like a flash bomb suddenly exploded, and the dazzling light flashed and disappeared. After this light, a spaceship appeared in the sky above his head. The spaceship was silver in color. 5 or 6 meters long, more than 2 meters wide, not big, but delicate, and looked like a mini plane. Li Ming was surprised at first, because it was hard to imagine that a capsule the size of a finger could become such a large small spaceship. But after watching for a while, Li Ming could only be a little puzzled. It was hard for Li Ming to imagine whether such a small spaceship would have the ability to fly through space. In any case, this is better than nothing. He flew up and saw the hatch of the small spaceship slowly opened. A seat appeared inside, like the position of a fighter jet. Li Ming did not hesitate and sat in it quickly. The hatch closed, and a control console appeared in front of Li Ming. He narrowed his eyes and looked at it, and then he was surprised. "Oh my god. This small spaceship is so advanced," Li Ming shouted in surprise. I saw a blue light flashing on the console, and various phantom information kept popping up. This included Li Ming's current location, the location of the galaxy, planet information, etc. What surprised Li Ming the most was that this small spaceship also had the ability to fly at high speed and transmit, but unfortunately, there was no safe coordinate record on the spaceship. But this was already an eye-opener for Li Ming. In Li Ming's cognition, there was no technology that could develop the ability to transmit on such a small spaceship. The ability to transmit requires a system and huge energy support, and it is generally difficult for smaller spaceships to meet such conditions. The fact that this capsule spaceship can have these capabilities can only mean that this technology comes from an advanced civilization. With a slight hum and a slight smile on his face, he controlled the spaceship with his mind, and it shot out like a white meteor, quickly passing through the sky of the silent sacrifice star. Li Ming was in no hurry to leave this place. He drove the capsule spaceship back and forth in the sky of the silent sacrifice star. In less than a moment, a large piece of land appeared in front of him. Xenozoi came here to quietly advance to the first level civilization. Because this place is hidden enough, and is also a forbidden place for aliens, it is the right choice. Li Ming just has a lot of things to do now, so it is better to stay on this planet first, which is both hidden and safe. Just when Li Ming had this idea, a scene on the ground caught his attention. In a jungle, 3 giant beasts were staging a fierce melee. A large number of trees were trampled down, and the ground was full of traces of trampling. Every movement of the giant beasts made the earth tremble slightly. The scene was spectacular. Among the 3 giant beasts, one looked like a mouse, one looked like a turtle, and the other looked like a crocodile. They were either biting or attacking each other with their sharp claws. Li Ming took a quick look and saw that the crocodile-like beast was clearly in the upper hand. The 3 beasts were of similar size, all 100 meters long and tens of meters high, far less than the sawtooth beasts and flying beasts that Li Ming had seen before, but even this size was already very huge for Li Ming. He lowered the speed of the capsule spacecraft and paid more attention to the battle below. However, as he watched, his attention was suddenly attracted by an object not far from the 3 beasts. A colorful crystal block appeared near them. This crystal block was not big from a high altitude and looked like an apple. Under his keen eyes, the energy aura on the surface of the crystal block had already attracted Li Ming. However, Li Ming did not dare to lower the flight altitude too much, so as not to be affected by the 3 beasts. For safety reasons, Li Ming landed on a mountaintop not far away. The capsule spacecraft turned into a capsule metal rod and was put away by Li Ming. After a simple inspection of the surroundings, his eyes continued to look at the battle in the distance. The 3 beasts all intended to approach the gorgeous crystal, but they blocked each other, so no one could succeed. The crystal was 2 or 3 meters long and wide, growing on a giant black rock. It was crystal clear, colorful, and extremely strange. Because there was a black rock underneath, the crystal was more conspicuous. The distance was too far, and Li Ming could only vaguely see some breath. But in order to find out, Li Ming released the flying dragon. He raised his right hand, and a green light flashed in his palm, and a small green dragon shot out from his hand. With the flying dragon replacing his eyes, Li Ming sat down on the spot. The flying dragon was in the form of a phantom, not very large in size. After a few flashes, it came to the vicinity of the crystal. He only felt a stream of breath constantly overflowing from the crystal, which contained powerful energy, but the energy breath was very complex. These energies were not pure energies, such as light energy, dark energy, and mutant crystal energy, which were all single and pure energies, but this thing was different. It did not have the above 3 energies, but released other complex elemental energies. Elemental energy is very broad, and is distributed on different planets. Chapter 286 3 Giant Beasts. There are planets with pure gas, extremely cold planets with pure ice, and planets with countless volcanoes. There are all kinds of things in the universe. These unique planets are often extremely dangerous, but there are also very rare pure elemental energies on them. For example, wind element energy crystals, fire element energy crystals, etc. These energies are widely used and rare, so they are extremely precious. However, the crystal block that Li Ming found was very strange. Judging from the energy aura emitted from it, the energy inside was elemental energy, but this elemental energy was always changing. Sometimes it was wind energy, sometimes it was thunder energy, and sometimes it was other elemental energy. Sensing this, Li Ming took a deep breath in confusion and said to himself, "What is this? A mixture of elemental energies? It shouldn't be. The elemental energies also restrain each other and cannot exist together. What is going on?" Li Ming thought about it carefully and held his chin with his right hand again. Elemental energies cannot coexist. This is Li Ming's previous understanding. For example, water and fire, when they restrain each other, their respective energies are offset, but this crystal is mixed with all kinds of elemental energies. Li Ming couldn't understand the existence of such a thing, but in Li Ming's cognition, there is one thing that is certain, that is, as long as it contains energy, it must be a good thing, which is also Li Ming's firm and unchanging concept. No matter what it is, just take it away. With this in his mouth, Li Ming stood up and smiled slightly, and walked over there. The three giant beasts were still fighting each other. Although the crocodile giant beast had the upper hand, it was not so easy to kill the opponent. The turtle-like giant beast has a hard shell, which is like a shield, that can avoid danger at any time. Although there are not many means of attack, the defensibility is extremely strong. The mouse giant beast has a strong vitality and extremely powerful means of attack. Although the whole body is covered with wounds, the combat power has not weakened at all, and those scars seem to have no effect on it. As for the crocodile giant beast, it is different. The entire body surface is a hard exoskeleton. If the opponent attacks its body, it will be injured by the exoskeleton. In this way, the battle becomes a continuous war of attrition, to see who has stronger endurance. But just as the three beasts were fighting, Li Ming had quietly come to the side of the crystal, staring at it with his sharp eyes. Just like what Fi Long saw, it was full of powerful mixed elemental energy, strange and powerful. He glanced at the beasts still fighting in the distance, and then looked at the crystal in front of him. He raised his right hand slightly and gently placed his palm on the surface of the crystal, which would be more conducive to understanding this thing. But just as Li Ming's hand touched the surface of the crystal, something went wrong. Because the three beasts had been fighting, there were constant rumbling sounds and vibrations coming from the ground nearby, but as soon as Li Ming's hand was placed on the crystal, the sound and vibration suddenly stopped. Li Ming didn't notice this at first, and it was only after a few seconds that he reacted. He turned his head slightly to the side, and looked in the direction of the three beasts. The three beasts stopped in place, as if time had stopped. The rat beast's claws tightly clasped the crocodile's back, while the crocodile beast's big mouth bit the turtle's shell, and the turtle beast bit the rat's tail. The three beasts were motionless, but their eyeballs were slightly moving, like rotating monitors, and their focus was instantly on Li Ming. As soon as Li Ming was stared at by the three beasts, his body froze in place. There was some embarrassment on his face, and his hands were a little at a loss at this time. Should he continue to put it on the crystal, or take it away? Li Ming was a little nervous, but when his eyes met the eyes of the three beasts, Li Ming immediately realized that something was wrong. He slowly retracted his right hand. Just as Li Ming retracted his hand, the three beasts suddenly let go of the opponent they were still biting in their mouths, and roared at Li Ming. Ah! The deafening roar blew over like a wind and wave, and the surrounding trees swayed with it. At this time, Li Ming dared not pay attention to the crystal, and turned his body, and ran away quickly. These wild beasts are different from ordinary wild beasts. There is no obvious distinction between levels, as if this is a place outside the rules of the universe, because the names of these wild beasts are not recorded. Li Ming's beast family illustration is the product of the ancient civilization of the Earth's core civilization. It can be said to be the most complete illustration, but there is no information about these species. But on the surface, these species have strong defense and attack capabilities, which have been reflected in the fight between the three giant beasts just now. Now the three giant beasts are targeting Li Ming together, which is naturally not a good thing. Li Ming quickly shuttled through the jungle, and branches and weeds passed by him quickly. Under the energy shield, these did not cause any harm to Li Ming, at most affecting Li Ming's speed. Boom boom boom. The sound of the earth shaking kept coming out. Each one was extremely clear, and the sound was getting closer and closer. Without looking back, Li Ming could already feel that the huge monster was close. With Li Ming's speed on the ground, he could not compare with the giant beast. After a few seconds, the rat beast caught up first and bit Li Ming with its big mouth. Sensing something strange behind him, Li Ming was shocked. He turned his head back and saw a bloody mouth pressing down on him. His expression was tense and his face changed drastically. He exclaimed, "Fuck," and flew into the air. Bang! The huge mouth bit the ground, biting off a piece of soil and trees. There was already a big pit on the ground. The rat beast shook its head to get rid of the soil and trees in its mouth, but did not continue to chase Li Ming. At this time, the turtle beast and the crocodile beast behind him actually bit each other again. The rat beast turned around and roared, and joined the battle again. Li Ming breathed a sigh of relief. Obviously, as long as he got close to the crystal, he would be attacked most violently. For Li Ming, this was a struggle for interests, and for the three beasts, it was a battle of life and death. As the saying goes, people die for money, and birds die for food. Watching the three giant beasts continue to fight from afar, Li Ming has given up the idea of stealing the crystal. The risk is obviously too great. His eyes are fixed on the battle group in the distance, and his figure falls back to the ground. Thinking of something in his mind, Li Ming's right hand suddenly stretched out, and a white light flashed in his palm. A square silver iron block appeared in his hand. This iron block is the size of an egg, with a smooth silver surface. There is nothing special about it. This thing is the capsule technology capsule cabin. Holding the silver square, carefully put it on the ground, and then stepped away. After a few seconds, a dazzling white light flashed, and the iron block disappeared, replaced by a cabin with a length and width of 5 or 6 meters. It looks like a small bungalow, and like a house made of metal. The hull is also silver, but it seems to be unusually hard. Li Ming looked up in the distance. The battle was still going on, and the rumbling sound was endless. Then his eyes returned to the capsule cabin and walked over. After entering the cabin, Li Ming sat cross-legged on the ground, raised his right hand, and released the Azure Dragon. King Lan was mainly monitoring the battle between the giant beasts and the existence of the crystal block, while Li Ming started to do other things in this cabin. Although the vibration sound continued to come, Li Ming was not worried at all. Everything was under control. The next time was to wait for the result of the battle between the three giant beasts. In Li Ming's opinion, it would not be over in a short time, and he could just do something else. First of all, Li Ming had to start practicing the Beast King Star book. There were so many wild beasts on this Gigi star. I didn't know if the Beast King Star book would be helpful to me, so I had to practice and give it a try. The second was the refining of elixirs. There were many materials on him, including a lot of elixir materials, such as Nebula Pill, Secret Fortress Pill, Beast Soul Pill, Beast Spirit Pill, etc. As long as the materials were sufficient and could be refined into elixirs, Li Ming would not let them go, so as to kill the extra time. Even after all these were done, Li Ming could still study the artifact of Nito in depth, or the development of the magic star book, etc. In short, try to do something in your spare time. Chapter 287, Exploration and Cultivation. In the vast universe, a huge fleet is approaching the Chaos Galaxy. The fleet consists of 13 warships in a mixed formation. One of the giant round spaceships is located in the center of the entire fleet. The size of this spaceship is close to a sphere, but not as round as a sphere. It is like an oblate circle. On its left and right, there are 5 U-shaped spaceships, a triangular spaceship in front, and a V-shaped spaceship in the back. The spaceships on the 4 sides are all very large, but compared with the oblate spaceship in the center, they are far behind. This fleet is from the Domingo star system of the Canis Major galaxy, the planet Dominic. In the triangular spaceship, located in front of the fleet, several aliens in the main cabin are discussing around a mirror. This mirror is the operating table, but unlike other known spaceships, this mirror is a separate body, not connected to any part of the spaceship, quietly floating in the air, and can be moved at will. Three aliens wearing armor and cloaks on their backs looked at the picture in the mirror together and sometimes said something. The image in the mirror is the Chaos Galaxy. The Chaos Galaxy is a star system with 12 planets of different sizes. Galad and Silent Sacrifice are both among them. The armor and cloaks of these three aliens are basically the same, but their appearances are very different. They don't seem to be from the same civilization. Standing in the middle is a round-headed alien who is somewhat similar to humans. The difference is that this alien has black and white stripes all over his body, just like a zebra, and there are no ears on both sides of his head, which is very strange. The alien on the left has a head like a flower pot, with sparse hair on his head, dark brown skin, and a broad and strong body. The one on the right is an alien with a pointed chin and a small head. Although there are three civilizations, they live together on Dominic Star and belong to the same star multi-civilization system. This naturally has a huge relationship with their galaxy environment. The round-headed one is a technological civilization named Dallas, a ninth order civilization. The one with a flower pot-like head is a power civilization named Dammon. The last one with a pointed chin and a small head is a wisdom civilization named Dagmar. The three were the commanders of the fleet's vanguard warships, and they had the final say over the fleet's goals, objectives, and directions. The phenomenon galaxy on the operating mirror kept changing, and each planet flashed by one, with the information on it attached. Dallas stared at it intently and said, "Galad is the home of many alien civilizations in the Milky Way. There are a lot of resources and trading systems on it. We are not suitable to occupy this planet now, and it is not easy to have conflicts, so we have to find a suitable home among the remaining planets." As the 12 planets of the phenomenon galaxy appeared on the mirror, Dammon's eyes locked on a planet, and he pointed his finger at it. The planet slowly turned and grew larger, and was completely presented on the mirror. "Isn't this the Sacco planet mentioned in Dallas' information? There are metal mines on it. Although there are civilizations in the Milky Way mining it, it should be a good choice as our temporary home," Dammon said very seriously. But Dagmar on the other side didn't seem to care. After shaking his head slightly, he turned his eyes, tapped the screen with his finger, and said, "Sacco is indeed good, but we still have to avoid conflicts with the Milky Way civilization as much as possible. I think the Silent Star is the best choice." When Dammon heard the Silent Star, he immediately showed displeasure, with a slightly worried look on his face, and said, "The Silent Star, the poison gas is too heavy. How can we use it as a base?" Dagmar smiled faintly and said, "From the perspective of our technological civilization, the Silent Star will not have much impact on our spacecraft. Similarly, as long as we wear protective clothing, we don't have to worry about the poisonous gas there. Besides, the Silent Star is a forbidden area for alien civilizations. We are here. We will definitely not be invaded or harassed. After a while, after we get in touch with Dali, we will look for a new habitable place. In any case, this must be better than the Canis Major galaxy." As Dagmar spoke, his eyes turned to Dallas, who had been silent. Dallas is a technological civilization. After listening to Dagmar's words, he nodded slightly and said, "In Canis Major, our race not only has to face environmental problems, but also has to deal with comets that may hit our planet at any time. Compared with here, that little bit of poison gas is nothing." Hearing that, Dallas and Dagmar agreed. Dammon did not insist on anything. After hesitating for a while, he said, "This needs to be reported to Lady Millicent. As long as Lady Millicent agrees, we, as pioneers, should go and see what's going on first." Dallas nodded slightly, his eyes looking at the operating mirror. After hesitating for a while, a look of melancholy appeared on his face, and there was even a bit of worry in his eyes. He said, "Since practicing that star class, Lady Millicent has become very irritable, and once she is angered, the consequences will be disastrous, so we have to be cautious when reporting this matter." Hearing this, Dammon's eyes suddenly widened a little, with a look of horror on his face, and said, "You mean Lady Millicent has already practiced that star class?" Dallas nodded slowly, also with a distressed look on his face, but after hesitating for a while, he still said, "But I'll report this matter. Fortunately, Alala is still by her side. It shouldn't be a big deal if I go there." Damon couldn't help but glance at Dagmar after hearing this, and the two nodded repeatedly. As soon as the voice fell, Dallas turned around and walked towards the portal of the cabin. The plan here was being discussed and carried out. Li Ming on the silent sacrifice star was still resting with his eyes closed. As for time, Li Ming didn't know how long it had passed. The sun rose and set, repeating on the silent sacrifice star, just like the earth in the past. After Li Ming finished practicing the star, he either made pills or studied other items on his body every day, sometimes the high-tech products in the star capsule, and sometimes the artifact Muxuniteng. In short, he had to take out some things he didn't understand and play with them. It can't be called boring, but it is also very boring. Li Ming has learned a lot about scientific and technological products, but he has made a lot of progress on the artifact Muxuniteng. The artifact Muxuniteng has a special basic ability, that is, the owner can control what kind of buds the Muxuniteng grows through the connection established with it. Different buds have different powers and abilities. Under the long-term erosion of consciousness, this Muxuniteng is becoming Li Ming's weapon little by little. It is extremely important to control the type of buds and the growth rate of the buds, because this is extremely critical to Li Ming when he cannot use other abilities of the artifact. Of course, under Li Ming's dedicated research, there are some results. The growth of buds requires a lot of energy to promote, and it can also grow slowly, which is related to Li Ming's needs. This also reflects that the artifact is not a weapon in low-level civilizations, because in terms of promoting the growth of buds, the energy volume in the body is a decisive factor, and low-level civilizations often do not have so much energy. After mastering these, Li Ming's control over the use of artifacts in the future will naturally be different from the past. After a long time, after Li Ming had studied everything, he could still hear the rumbling sound from time to time. The battle outside was still going on, but the situation was different. The three giant beasts had become two. The one that escaped was not dead, but escaped. It was the turtle giant beast that escaped. Among the remaining two, the crocodile giant beast naturally had a great advantage, making the mouse giant beast unable to hold on. Li Ming had basically learned the endurance and tenacious vitality of these giant beasts. A giant beast in full state was really not easy to deal with. For the two giant beasts that had entered the decadent period, Li Ming knew very well that his chance had come. If Li Ming still couldn't get the crystal in this case, then Li Ming could just give up. This was exactly what Li Ming thought. He looked into the distance with his eyes and muttered, "Success or failure depends on this one move. If it still doesn't work, then we can only leave here." After a while, Li Ming quietly came to the vicinity of the huge crystal, paused, stopped, looked at the giant beasts that were still fighting in the distance, and then returned to the crystal. He had his own ideas in his mind. He waved his right hand behind him, and his cape fluttered. With a flash of light, Walker appeared. Li Ming glanced at Walker, leaned over and stretched out his right hand, and said, "This is the star capsule. I will attract the attention of the two giant beasts later. You use the star capsule to retrieve the crystal." Walker did not reply. He walked lightly to Li Ming's hand, lowered his head, opened his mouth and bit the star capsule, then turned and walked towards the colorful crystal. Li Ming smiled with satisfaction and walked away. Chapter 288 Colorful Crystals. Walker walked lightly to the crystal. For Walker's body, the crystal was still very large. He looked the crystal up and down with a pair of cat eyes, and then the blue light flashed in his mouth. The light of the star capsule had already radiated to the crystal. Under the blue light, it had already begun to absorb. The larger the object, the slower it absorbed. This colorful crystal naturally would not be too fast. Walker's action immediately attracted the attention of the two giant beasts. The fight between them stopped instantly, and they rushed over here frantically. The giant beasts that had been fighting for a long time should have been very weak, but they immediately became energetic after seeing something approaching the crystal. Before the two giant beasts approached, white light suddenly flashed in the sky, as if two dazzling stars fell down. Boom. A loud noise sounded, white light flashed, and the rat beast and the crocodile beast shook their bodies and stepped back a few steps. The white light just now was two electromagnetic wave balls. In order to deal with such giant beasts, Li Ming condensed a lot of energy in them. One hit the head of the rat beast and the other hit the eyes of the crocodile beast. Under the heavy blow, the head of the rat beast was already a bloody mess, and a big hole was blown out by the electromagnetic wave, causing it to roar RAAH. As for the crocodile beast, blood flowed out of its eyes, forming a bloody hole. This blow made the two beasts really suffer. Before the beasts could react, Li Ming's hand suddenly flashed green light and slapped the ground fiercely. More than a dozen black vines rose from the ground. These vines were extremely hard, and no less than sharp weapons. This was the ability of the vine demon. Zenazoi also used this ability in the battle with Li Ming. The roots of the vines were as thick as oil barrels, but the tops were as sharp as needles and wheat spikes. Pa, 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 several sounds were heard, and the black vines pierced the hind legs of the rat beast like needles and threads. Ordinary vines might wrap around the thighs and climb and shrink, but this black vine penetrated the flesh and wrapped around the bones inside. This immediately caused the rat beast to roar in pain, and its back legs could not move at all, and its entire body was already stiff in place. As for the crocodile beast, the same method was used. Although the crocodile beast's back was full of hard exoskeleton, there was no exoskeleton on its limbs, so it was naturally unable to resist the entanglement and penetration of the vines. After more than 10 seconds, the beast's painful roar was already in his ears. The previous vibration had completely disappeared. With the help of these dozen black vines, the beast had been controlled. Seeing this, Li Ming stood up and relaxed. Li Ming was able to succeed so easily because the two beasts were already exhausted. Whether it was reaction speed or attack intensity, they were all in the fatigue stage. Li Ming had waited for so long, wasn't it, for this result? Looking at the beast that could no longer move, Li Ming smiled, turned his head, and looked in the direction of Walker. Walker's mouth was open to the crystal, and blue light was flashing on the surface of the crystal. It looked as if Walker was going to swallow the crystal, but it was actually the effect of the star capsule in Walker's mouth. But when Li Ming was watching, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind, and his consciousness actually noticed something unusual. He turned around hurriedly, and saw a huge figure suddenly pounced on Li Ming. Li Ming frowned, and his eyes widened a little, but he did not dodge, because Walker was not far away from Li Ming. If he dodged, Walker's plan to collect crystals would inevitably fail. This giant beast was very fast, and as soon as it came forward, it opened its mouth and bit Li Ming. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and a golden wall suddenly appeared in front of Li Ming. It was the magic shield. The giant beast opened its mouth and bit the magic shield directly. The seemingly hard magic shield only lasted for 1 or 2 seconds, before it broke like a mirror with a snap. The giant beast that just appeared suddenly was the turtle beast that disappeared earlier. The golden shield broke, and the giant beast then opened its mouth to bite again. In a hurry, Li Ming's eyeballs suddenly turned into golden water drops. At the same time, he clapped his hands and clasped them together in front of his chest. In an instant, light shone all around Li Ming's body. A series of swoosh, swoosh, swoosh sounds rang in his ears, and green chains sprang out from the ground. The chains were in a green phantom state, and the overall thickness was no less than the width of a bus. There were 3 chains on the left and 3 on the right, hitting the turtle beast opposite. The turtle beast's neck, limbs, and body were all entangled by the green chains, which made the big mouth that was about to swallow Li Ming suddenly stop. The bloody mouth was only a few meters away from Li Ming. Li Ming's golden water drop eyes turned slightly, and he whispered, "The power of the Beast King." After he said that, the green light around his body became stronger. These green lights did not come from Li Ming's body, but were emitted from the surface around Li Ming's body, just like the ground radiating light. The light became stronger and stronger, and a huge green shadow rose from the ground with the light. The scene was like a huge altar rising from the ground, except that the entire altar was a shadow woven by light, and Li Ming was in the middle of the altar. The entire altar was like a round token, and Li Ming was in the middle of the token. Behind him was a giant beast's head. This giant beast was woven by green light, like a lion's head, but more majestic than a lion. It had a pair of eyes with green light flashing. Although it was closed, it still made people feel scared. The majestic shadow giant beast's head was located at one end of the altar, that is, behind Li Ming, and in front of Li Ming's body was a pattern formed by green light, just like the pattern on an ordinary coin. On both sides of the altar, there were 3 green whirlpools, which were where the 6 chains stretched out. This was one of the abilities of the advanced star class, the Beast King star class. The turtle beast didn't seem to be too afraid, but its body was bound, and it couldn't move for a while. It wanted to struggle hard, but its limbs couldn't make large movements at all, and could only move a little bit. Li Ming's eyes were fixed on the beast, and his face showed a struggling expression. Supporting the existence of this huge altar is also a test for Li Ming's energy, but the biggest reason is still related to this beast. The Beast King Star book that Li Ming cultivated was mainly used to deal with wild beasts and demon beasts, and these 2 kinds of beasts were accorded through the existing cognition of advanced civilizations. Therefore, in the Beast King Star book, these abilities are aimed at these 2 kinds of beasts. The wild beasts on the Silent Sacrifice star are not in the records, so the current response is just forced, so it is more strenuous. The turtle beast has been trying to break free, and its open mouth has slowly closed, and its head is slowly moving away from Li Ming's body. Obviously, the turtle beast is still greatly restricted by the power of the Beast King. Li Ming constantly increases the output of energy to ensure that the beast will not break free, and at the same time, he is also paying attention to the situation on Walker's side. Walker had not moved at all, and the progress was very smooth. The entire crystal was already flickering slightly, and it became blurred like a phantom, which meant that the crystal was about to be collected into the star capsule. After a few seconds, the originally colorful crystal suddenly flashed and disappeared, and the blue light in Walker's mouth quickly faded, and the collection of crystals was completed. It was not only Li Ming who saw this scene, but the 3 giant beasts all saw it. At this moment, the flames in the hearts of the 3 giant beasts were instantly ignited. The roar suddenly became more violent, as if it had forgotten the pain. The rat beast and the crocodile beast actually began to struggle. Even the thighs wrapped by the black vines began to use force. Even the turtle beast in front of Li Ming, who was bound by the power of the Beast King, began to struggle hard. The green chain that originally bound its body was instantly tightened, and Li Ming suddenly became more exhausted. Seeing this scene, Li Ming's eyes narrowed again, and he looked behind him. He saw that Walker, who had already succeeded, came behind Li Ming in a few flashes, and entered Li Ming's cloak with a flash of grey light. Since he had already succeeded, Li Ming had no need to continue fighting with these wild beasts. He slowly separated his clasped hands, and the phantom altar fell back to the ground, and the green chain wrapped around the turtle beast returned to the ground. Without the restraints, the turtle beast roared and pounced on him, and Li Ming flashed and flew into the air. Chapter 289 from the Canis Major Dwarf Galaxy. Although the beasts were fierce, they were land animals after all. They had no way to deal with Li Ming, who flew into the air. Li Ming's eyes swept downwards, and he saw 3 beasts roaring at him, baring their teeth and claws, and were extremely angry. He retracted his gaze, raised his right hand lightly, and threw a metal capsule casually. A dazzling white light flashed, and a small spaceship appeared. Li Ming flew into the spaceship, and a silver light flashed, and the spaceship swept away. The small spaceship kept climbing higher and higher, heading for space. This small spaceship has the ability to teleport. Although the teleportation distance is not far, there is no problem returning to Galaystar. At this moment, a major event is also happening in the Chaos Galaxy, because a huge fleet has quietly entered this star system. In the world of high-level civilizations, the detection system and radar system are already very advanced. No matter what kind of civilization, they have their own unique means and methods. The appearance of this huge fleet naturally attracted the attention of the aliens who have been stationed here for a long time. In a circular building on Galaystar, on a 5-meter diameter operating table, the trajectory of this fleet has quietly appeared. There were 7 people around the console. They were the 7 top leaders of the 7 largest trading stations on Galahad. These aliens looked very similar. The upper part of their heads was larger, the lower part was smaller, their skin was brown-green, and there was a small round meat bun on their heads. At first glance, they seemed to be aliens from the same civilization. Is this all the information about this fleet? Robbie Ross, the station master of the Robbie trading station, said after staring at the console for a while. Rivers Babette, the station master of the Babette trading station, turned his eyes to look at Robbie Ross opposite. He snorted coldly and said, "Robbie Ross, it is not easy to get this information. According to the previous monitoring data, this fleet may come from outside the Milky Way, but our monitoring system has not yet sounded the alarm." Station Master Herman, who was sitting next to Rivers, tilted his eyes slightly and looked at Rivers, seeming to be very concerned about this. In addition to Herman, there were naturally several other station masters who cast their eyes here. After all, this information point was very important. Rivers glanced at everyone and continued, "That is to say, this fleet from outside the Milky Way has extremely advanced technology, and their level of civilization may be higher than ours. Being able to discover them when they enter the Chaos Galaxy is already the limit of our current technology, which is far more important than discovering them when they approach Galaystar." Rivers continued. Robbie Ross's expression became solemn and said, "Okay, now let's talk about your opinions." As he spoke, his eyes had already looked at everyone in the room one by one. Everyone's expression was not very good. For such a sensitive matter, every decision was very critical. Herman, who was sitting next to Rivers, moved slightly and said, "I don't think there is any need to consider this matter. Are we going to hand over the foundation of Galaystar for many years to others?" Herman's words immediately resonated, because this involved the interests of most people, and no one was willing to hand it over to others easily. Some nodded, some whispered in agreement, and some cast an approving look. The actions of most people were pushing the result to an extreme. Robbie Ross glanced at these people, and finally his eyes stopped on Rivers, as if waiting for his response. Rivers snorted lightly, glanced at everyone, and said coldly, "Is this your result? How stupid." As soon as these words came out, they invisibly angered everyone. Herman opened his eyes wide and turned to look at Rivers. After hesitating for a while, he calmed down and said, "Then according to you, should we give it up?" Although it was Herman who asked, it also represented the thoughts of many people. They all cast their eyes and waited for Rivers' answer. Rivers snorted lightly, not caring, and said, "How do you know that this fleet is coming to our Galley planet? Can you be sure that there is no advanced civilization in this fleet? If you jump to conclusions when everything is still unknown, what else can you say but stupid?" The harsh words were not only a reprimand, but also showed his anger. This statement obviously made some sense, but at the same time, it also disgusted everyone. Robbie Ross suddenly stood up, looked at Rivers fiercely, and said, "Rivers, do you have this information?" Rivers said calmly, "This information needs to be discovered. I have prepared an unmanned spacecraft, and will launch it in the next few days, to test the other party's bottom first. There is no need for this." A mechanical female voice suddenly came, interrupting Rivers' speech. These people were originally focusing on Rivers, but when they heard this voice, they turned their heads. Suddenly, silver lines twisted and turned in an open space next to the operating table, as if the space had fissioned. A second later, Adriana's figure appeared. The powerful aura was like a breeze that caressed everyone's face. Although the wind was soft, the breath was heavy, as if the wind froze everyone's expression. This feeling hit the bottom of the heart, just like a low-level civilization seeing a 9th-level civilization, but all the people sitting around the operating table were 9th-level civilizations, and they couldn't help but feel nervous when they saw Adriana, and didn't know what to do. Without waiting for these people to say anything, Adriana's light footsteps had already come to the operating table, and her right hand gently stroked the operating table. Blue light flashed and intertwined, and all the information about the joint fleet had appeared. Adriana glanced at everyone with contempt, and said, "My name is Adriana, I come from the Middle Civilization. Now, I temporarily requisition all the resources and troops on this planet, to deal with the invaders." The 7 people were immediately confused, occasionally looking at each other, but under Adriana's powerful aura, they could only listen carefully. "This fleet comes from the Canis Major Dwarf Galaxy. There are first-level civilizations like me in the fleet, or higher than my level." Adriana continued to speak, her eyes turned left and right to look at everyone. Hearing the 4 words first-level civilization was enough to make everyone stand in awe and be convinced. In the field of civilization levels, high-level civilizations are like gods to low-level civilizations. But when hearing Adriana introduce those fleets, these 9th-level people couldn't help but show worry again. and each of them was uneasy and at a loss. Adriana continued, in our galaxy, you low-level civilizations should have been completely wiped out, because your existence will only consume resources. Adriana walked around the operating table, looking at everyone with a cold gaze, and continued, however, our advanced civilization in the Chinese system has acquiesced to your existence with only one purpose, which is to let you prevent the invasion of species outside the Milky Way. You should be grateful, but it is disappointing that you still want to enter the Chinese system and cause trouble for our Chinese system. Now that the real invaders have come, your performance is really frustrating. Adriana continued to speak, standing next to Rivers. A pair of empty eyes, emitting a dim light, continued to say, I even think I should reconsider whether to continue to retain your low-level civilizations. This sentence is like an uncertain factor, which is unfriendly to anyone present, because in front of the real advanced civilization, the low level is indeed so small. Adriana snorted and said, okay, now, integrate all your weapons, spaceships, and equipment and gather here. At the end, Adriana pointed her finger at the operating table and lightly tapped it. The light on the operating table turned, and a location on the Galley planet appeared. The eyes of the 7 people all stopped at it. At the same time, in the space of the silent sacrifice star, Li Ming's capsule spaceship had emerged, but Li Ming did not teleport from the silent sacrifice star to space, but flew. Compared with teleportation, flying obviously consumes more energy. Chapter 290 Help Message. In the space of the silent sacrifice star, a small aircraft is slowly sailing. On the predetermined orbit of outer space, this small spaceship is like a satellite orbiting the Earth. It is the capsule spaceship driven by Li Ming. In front of the console, Li Ming has begun the next transmission operation. Although this capsule spaceship has the ability to transmit, it is still relatively complicated to transmit. This is not like the large spaceships of those foreign civilizations, which record a large number of safety coordinates during the development stage. This small capsule spaceship is blank. At this time, it is necessary to search for safety coordinates before transmission. The way to obtain safety coordinates varies according to local conditions. If it is in space outside the star system, it can be purchased from the cruise bay. If it is within the star system, it can be searched by itself through signals or seek help from civilized creatures in the star system. Self-searching is slow, time-consuming, and laborious. Seeking help from other civilizations is much simpler. Li Ming tapped his finger on the console and sent a signal for help. Shortly after Li Ming released the signal, 2 places received Li Ming's signal at the same time, and the people who received these signals also showed doubts. In an airspace of the Chaos Galaxy, a triangular spaceship was slowly flying. This triangular spaceship was the vanguard spaceship of the Canis Major Galaxy fleet. The 3 aliens in the main cabin were looking at an operating mirror with a puzzled look. The round-headed Dallas was the first to say hi, and then looked at Dagmar and Damon beside him. Dagmar frowned, stared at the operating mirror for a moment, and said first, this is a distress signal from the silent sacrifice star. Damon's expression tightened, his eyes widened a little, and his eyes turned to Dallas, saying, the silent sacrifice star? Aren't we going there? Could it be? Before Damon finished speaking, Dallas suddenly waved his hand, his eyes full of other thoughts, and after hesitating for a while, he said, no, going to the silent sacrifice star is our top secret. No one can know. As for this distress signal, it may just be an accident. Damon couldn't help but fall into deep thought after hearing this, but soon nodded. Dagmar on the side glanced at the help message casually and said, what should we do now? Dallas stared at the operating mirror with his eyes fixed, thinking in his mind, if this help message is just an accident, then there is naturally nothing to worry about, but if it is not an accident, then the matter is more complicated. After thinking carefully for a moment, Dallas nodded slightly, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and said, as a pioneer, we must help the fleet eliminate all worries. Since this signal comes from the Star of Silent Sacrifice, and is a help signal, then give him the safe coordinates of the Sacco Star. Sacco Star? Damon said in surprise. Dagmar on the other side also showed a puzzled look, not understanding Dallas' intention. Dallas, however, looked confident, and said, we can go to Sacco Star to take a look. First, we can see what the situation is on Sako Star, and second, to see if we can get some useful information from this person. Oh. Hehe. Dagmar understood after hearing it and laughed strangely. After some thought, Damon seemed to have figured out the intention, but his expression did not change much. No matter what this help message means, these Dominic people came from the Canis Major galaxy. The reason why they did not choose Galley directly was that they wanted to live in peace with the civilization of the Milky Way. Therefore, the help signal from the silent sacrifice star should be handled with caution. Not only Dominic, but also Galley Star began to be confused after receiving this signal. Adriana was alone in a room, looking at the operating table in front of her. There were two messages on it, one about the central system and the other about the help message from the silent sacrifice star. Adriana moved her fingers and clicked on the central system information first. A series of characters then appeared on the operating table. Seeing this message, Adriana frowned slightly, and her face was full of caution. This was the first time that this first level civilization showed such an expression after coming to the outer system. And the information about the central system also disappeared clearly. The large and small Magellanic galaxies are all ready to move. The crisis of the Second Galactic War has formed. Avoid conflicts with the Canis Major galaxy as much as possible. This information is crucial, and it is also what makes Adriana feel troubled. For the Milky Way, there is actually always the risk of a galactic war, because there are many satellite galaxies around the Milky Way. If the Earth is the Milky Way, then the Moon is a satellite galaxy. The competition for resources is a large-scale war between galactic civilizations, much larger than an interstellar war, but generally this kind of war will not happen, because the cost is huge. So since the birth of the Milky Way, there has only been one galactic war. Receiving this information now means that the situation is extremely critical. After a little thought, Adriana stretched out her hand and opened the help message. After looking at it for a while, she stood up and left the room. When she came to the hall outside, 7 people were standing in front of the huge operating table. When they saw Adriana, they all cast their eyes and bowed. Adriana didn't care. She quickly walked to the operating table and glanced. In the blue light on the operating table, it was the assembly area that Adriana had just marked. Densely packed combat spacecraft were laid out in a layer. Because they came from different civilizations, the appearance and volume of these spacecraft were all different. Adriana nodded with satisfaction and said, "Very good." After these 2 simple words, Adriana stretched out her hand and tapped the console. The picture of the spaceship assembly disappeared and was replaced by the pictures of the planets in the Chaos Galaxy. At the same time, a distress signal appeared near the silent sacrifice star. The 7 people in front of them seemed to have known about the silent sacrifice star's distress information, so they did not show any abnormality, but just stood there quietly. Adriana then said, "You should have seen the silent sacrifice star's distress signal. Who will go to the expedition?" As soon as these words came out, the 7 people in front of them paused and even felt a little puzzled. Robbie Ross first looked at the people around him, then turned his gaze to Adriana. After hesitating for a while, he asked, "Going to the expedition is?" Adriana tapped the console again, and the picture changed to a planet called Sako. Then he said, "We are still unsure about the authenticity of this help message, and it is even harder to say whether it is related to the civilization of the Canis Major galaxy. So, I will reply the safety coordinates of the Sako planet to this help message. Who among you will go to Sako planet to find out what is going on?" Robbie Ross was still a little puzzled after hearing this. His head sank slightly, and he fell into deep thought. Adriana continued, "No matter what the purpose of the Canis Major galaxy coming here is, you must always be vigilant. As for this help message, it is just to lead him to Sako planet. You just need to go and find out what is going on. If it is an invader, then ask clearly. After all, we can't just sit there and wait for death," Adriana said sternly. Everyone bowed their heads and saluted, not daring to disobey, but everyone had their own ideas in their hearts. But in front of this advanced civilization, they could only swallow their anger and spit. After scanning the crowd with her empty eyes, Adriana's eyes immediately locked onto 3 people. After a slight smile, she said, "Robbie Ross, Herman, Rivers, you 3 are the strongest here, so you go." The three were stunned after hearing this. As far as their true thoughts were concerned, they didn't want to go at all, but in front of this advanced civilization, they could only obey orders. After the three looked at each other helplessly, they nodded and replied, yes. After the arrangements were made here, Li Ming, who was on the Star of Silence, began to have difficulties, because to help reply messages appeared on the control console of Li Ming's capsule spacecraft, which surprised Li Ming a little, and also a little bit. Damn, to replies? Are all the aliens here so enthusiastic? Li Ming said to himself in surprise with a smile on his face. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 291, Sarko Planet. With a light tap, the coordinate information appeared. The coordinates from the Silent Sacrifice Star to another planet were displayed on the console. Looking at those coordinates, Li Ming frowned. Safe coordinates often come with planetary information and galaxy information, so that you can better distinguish your location from the destination you want to go to, but the coordinate information in front of you does not have these, it only provides a transmission path. Li Ming shook his head in confusion, and then clicked on another reply message. As soon as he opened this message, Li Ming was still frowning, because the content of this message was the same as the previous one. This made Li Ming frown slightly, revealing a puzzled look. The reply messages from different places had exactly the same content, but after thinking for a moment, Li Ming relaxed, smiled lightly, and said, different places, the reply is the same. It seems that it should be the way to Galley Star. After saying this, Li Ming still sighed for a long time, pointed his finger on the console, randomly adopted a coordinate information, and ignored it. The two messages came from Galley Star and another area in the system. If there was another purpose, it would be impossible for the replies to be consistent so coincidentally, so Li Ming did not care too much. Sitting in the spaceship, Li Ming closed his eyes slightly, began to rest his mind, and began to plan his future affairs. Now Li Ming has 2 Beigi and 1 Liuan power. As long as the 2 Beigi are combined into the nebula power, Li Ming has gathered 3 Liuan powers, and Huayu. Li Ming also has 1, that is to say, Li Ming can advance with 2 Huayu. Thinking of this, Li Ming couldn't help but feel happy, because the height of the first level civilization is the realm that Li Ming has always wanted to reach. Since he knew it, Li Ming gave all the previously refined beast soul pills and beast spirit pills to Moran Walker. After returning to Galley Star, Li Ming will continue to look for the whereabouts of Huayu. Li Ming was very satisfied with this arrangement, but Li Ming didn't know that the direction of things had completely deviated from his plan. After an unknown amount of time, the spaceship that had been in the process of transmission stopped steadily in place. The sudden stillness made Li Ming slowly open his eyes. As soon as he looked at the control console in front of him, Li Ming frowned immediately. Then he looked out through the transparent window of the spaceship, and was stunned for a moment. He whispered to himself, fuck, where is this? In front of Li Ming was a dark brown planet. There was a thin layer of atmosphere on the surface of this planet. It was desolate and quiet. In the dark space, this planet made people shudder. He retracted his gaze, and looked at the control console in front of him again. He saw the information characters on it jumping, and the information about the planet in front of him had been revealed. Sako, also known as the Iron Star, is an extremely desolate planet with a cold surface and a huge temperature difference between day and night. It is not suitable for any living creature to live, but it is rich in a large amount of metal mines. After reading this information, Li Ming looked puzzled, because Li Ming still couldn't figure out why he was teleported to this planet. At this moment, a huge triangular spaceship had quietly approached Li Ming's capsule spaceship. This triangular spaceship was huge. Compared with it, Li Ming's capsule spaceship was like a person standing in front of a 40-50 meter high building. It was not noticeable at all. When such a huge spaceship came, Li Ming's spaceship immediately noticed it. He stared at the other spaceship with his eyes, not knowing why. But the next moment, Li Ming's spaceship issued a red alarm of beep beep. The capsule spaceship was locked by the other party. The strange spaceship and the inexplicable lock made Li Ming panic. The lock meant that the other party could shoot Li Ming down at any time, which was extremely dangerous. Without hesitation, Li Ming operated the spaceship to go straight to Sako Star. As far as Li Ming's current cognition was concerned, if life stayed in space, it would undoubtedly be fatal. Even if it was to be destroyed by the other party, Li Ming had to enter Sako Star as much as possible to avoid being in space. The triangular spaceship was the vanguard spaceship of the Dominic Starfleet. The 39th level in the main cabin looked at the operating mirror with concentration, but each of them showed a strange look. He flew to Sako Star. Damon said excitedly. Dallas was calm and said with a smile, "This guy must be scared. Although we have no intention of destroying him, I originally wanted to dock with him. In this case, let's go to Sako together." Damon nodded. The triangular spaceship turned around in space and flew towards Sako. But just as the triangular spaceship flew towards Sako, a stream of light flashed in the distant space, and an elliptical spaceship flashed and came. It was just teleported here. The operating table in the main cabin suddenly lit up, capturing all the surrounding conditions of Sako in a few seconds, and standing in front of the operating table were Rivers and others. The light spots on the operating table flashed, and the figure of the triangular spaceship was also among them. It was just teleported here and caught up with this scene. Robbie Ross immediately looked at it and said, "It's going to Sako." Rivers and Herman quickly turned their eyes to the operating table. Under the weaving of blue light, the triangular spaceship was passing through the atmosphere of Sako little by little. "What should we do?" Robbie Ross said again. Rivers looked calm, and after looking at the two people beside him, he said, "There is only one spaceship. Let's just follow it and see." As he spoke, the elliptical spaceship started up immediately and began to approach the Sako Star. At this time, Li Ming didn't know that there were two spaceships behind him. He only knew that the triangular spaceship had locked onto him. However, it was strange that, after locking onto Li Ming's spaceship, the triangular spaceship did not attack, but instead followed Li Ming from a distance. Li Ming kept paying attention to the movements of the spaceship behind him, and at the same time, he was thinking about landing quickly. The terrain of the Sako Star was now displayed on the console. There were uneven hills everywhere. These hills were not rocks or mountains, but looked a bit like the surface of pebbles, smooth and very hard. The waves were undulating, and a bit like the frozen sea surface. The overall size of the Sako Star was not large, like an iron ball floating in the universe. It was not important why it came to such a place. What was important was why there was a spaceship here and locked onto itself. As soon as the thought flashed through his mind, Li Ming's capsule spaceship was close to the surface of the planet. A mountain range with large undulating waves became Li Ming's landing point. The triangular spaceship behind him also followed Li Ming closely. Because it had been locked, no matter where Li Ming's spaceship flew, the triangular spaceship would follow. However, this situation was broken by Li Ming after a moment. Li Ming's spaceship quickly sank into the hinterland of a mountain range, like a fish swimming between the waves of the sea. After a few flashes, it disappeared in the mountains. In the main cabin of the triangular spaceship, the three aliens were still calm and composed. Although the image of Li Ming's spaceship disappeared, the lock light spot still existed. Simply put, it was just that Li Ming's spaceship was blocked by the undulating mountains. When the triangular spaceship came to the sky above this mountain range, Li Ming's spaceship at the bottom had already come into view, but at this time the spaceship landed quietly on the ground, motionless. Seeing this, Dallas snorted and said, "Let's go down and see what's going on." As he said this, Dallas turned around and left the main cabin with the other two. The triangular spaceship made a slight bang, and the energy shield disappeared. At the same time, a white light flashed below, just like a searchlight was turned on. Three figures slowly descended from the light and arrived near the small spaceship on the ground in a few seconds. After taking a look at the spaceship, Dallas suddenly froze and stopped in place, which also made Dagmar and Damon stop in a hurry, but the two of them obviously didn't understand why. "What's wrong?" Damon turned his gaze to Dallas and asked. Dallas looked up and down at the small spaceship in front of him and whispered, "This spaceship looks like a capsule spaceship of our technological civilization." Damon paused after hearing this, and his eyes turned to the spaceship in front of him. Dagmar on the side raised his eyebrows, hesitated for a moment, looked at Dallas, and said, "Didn't Dali just give this technology to Dali? Did Dali secretly wrestle this technology?" Dagmar's suspicion was not unreasonable, but Dallas did not comment. After glancing around, he said, "What's going on? Just go up and ask clearly." As he spoke, Dallas walked quickly towards the small spaceship. When he came to the front of the spaceship, Dallas was stunned. His eyes widened a little, and at the same time, he looked around in panic. Chapter 292, Arrival. There was no sign of Li Ming in the small spaceship, so Damon and Dagmar also hurriedly looked around. However, there were undulating mountains everywhere, so it was not easy to find someone. Just as the three were looking around, Li Ming slowly walked out from behind a small hill. He looked around, and saw that the three people in front of him had been looked at once. Under his calm expression, he was suddenly enlightened. All the information about the origins and identities of the three people in front of him had been discovered little by Li Ming through his wisdom eyes. The Dominicans came from the Domingo star system in the Canis Major dwarf galaxy. They arrived in the Milky Way, just to find a place to live. The reason for this has a lot to do with the Canis Major dwarf galaxy. The Canis Major dwarf galaxy is a satellite galaxy of the Milky Way. There are more than 1 billion stars in it. Of course, there are also many civilized creatures. However, compared with the Milky Way, the resources in it are still too few, and this irregular galaxy is also very dangerous. Black holes, pulsars, neutron stars, black dwarfs, meteorites, comets, etc. These are the biggest threats to civilized creatures. There are naturally many such celestial bodies in the center of the Milky Way, but the Milky Way is large in size and its spiral arms rotate stably, so it is much safer. Excluding risks, there are also few resources in Canis Major, especially advanced materials, elixir materials, etc. Without these materials, the growth of civilized creatures will be greatly restricted. Excluding these factors, the civilizations in Canis Major also have fierce struggles. It can be said that they are surrounded by enemies and face many crises. This is why Dominic Starr entered the Milky Way. In order to enter the Milky Way, the Dominicans also made a lot of preparations, such as transferring the technology of advanced scientific and technological civilization to Dali in exchange for the coordinate information of the Milky Way. From this information level, the other party seems to be pitiful, but people's hearts are terrible. These aliens from Canis Major are not those ordinary wandering civilizations, seeking other habitable places as their goal, but they do not rule out the use of interstellar warfare. When the three noticed Li Ming, they were slightly shocked because Li Ming had a ninth order civilization. However, when they saw Li Ming alone, they became proud again, and did not take Li Ming seriously at all. Dallas smiled contemptuously and said, "We are looking for you without any bad intentions. We just want to know about the information of the silent sacrifice star. Tell us everything you know, and we will let you go." Li Ming was calm, not panicked or surprised. Instead, he smiled lightly and said, "Okay, then I will tell you." Li Ming had been on the silent sacrifice star for quite a while, and had some understanding of it. It was natural for him to tell the other party. However, while Li Ming was talking about it, something related to Li Ming was already happening on the Galley Star. In a house on the Galley Star, Adriana was looking at the operating table in front of her. While she was so busy, a beeping sound came from her right arm. Adriana turned her eyes and looked at her arm. Then she raised her right hand in front of her body. She saw a blue light flashing on her arm. A three-dimensional pattern woven by light had emerged. The light spots in the pattern flashed, and a galaxy appeared. This galaxy was the Chaos Galaxy, and the place where the light spots flashed was the Sacco Star. Upon seeing this information, Adriana's eyes suddenly changed, and she whispered, "Nito's signal appeared on the Sacco Star?" There was disbelief between her eyebrows, but soon she thought of something, and her eyes suddenly fixed on the Sacco Star in the pattern again, whispering, "Is it him who sent the distress signal?" Thinking of this, Adriana moved and walked out quickly. Her anxious figure seemed to be rushing to go somewhere. When she came to the outside of the building, Adriana stood on the top of the circular building, pointed her finger at the void above her head, and a muffled sound was heard, and the silver spaceship suddenly appeared out of thin air, and her figure moved, and flew directly up. Entering the main cabin of the silver spaceship, Adriana pointed at the operating table, and said to her right arm while walking, "If you see this person, stop him first. Let's put the matter of the Dominicans aside for now." As she spoke, she had already arrived in front of the operating table. The calm operating table was rippled, and the transmission coordinates had been determined. The spaceship flashed for a while, and with a bang, it disappeared on the spot. At this time on the Sacco star, Li Ming was talking to the Dominicans about the Star of Silence. The three Dominicans also nodded repeatedly, and sometimes looked at each other in surprise. Among them, Damon frowned slightly and said, "So, the most dangerous thing on the Star of Silence is not the poison gas, but the giant wild beast." Li Ming did not comment. After hesitating for a while, he said, "The poison gas can be resisted by protective clothing, but this wild beast is very difficult to deal with." Dallas nodded slightly, his eyes turned, and he changed the subject and asked, "Do you know Dali?" Li Ming chuckled a few times and replied, "Dali is my friend, of course I know him." Hearing that Dali and Li Ming are good friends, Dallas immediately showed a look of surprise, and then asked, "Then where is Dali now?" Li Ming did not answer immediately, but hesitated. After thinking for a while, he sighed slightly and said, "Dali and I were originally in the Bidet galaxy, but for some reason, we were suddenly besieged by many galaxy civilizations. I escaped by luck. As for Dali, now his life or death is uncertain." At the end, Li Ming even showed a sigh, with a little sadness in his eyes, as if he was very worried. Dallas frowned slightly, with a look of realization, and whispered, "No wonder Dali has been slow to reply to messages. It turns out he's in trouble." This whisper was obviously not directed to Li Ming, but in front of the wise eye, no information could escape. Li Ming looked into the distance and said, "I guess Dali is in great danger this time. After all, the ones chasing us are from a first-level civilization in the Milky Way. I only escaped by hiding in the Star of Silence, otherwise I wouldn't be standing here telling you this." "First-level civilization?" Damon said in astonishment. He looked at Li Ming, and then at Dallas and Dagmar. Dallas was still calm. After rolling his eyes, he sighed in Li Ming's tone and said, "So, you asked for help on the Silent Sacrifice Star to escape from there?" Li Ming nodded slightly and replied, "The wild beasts on the Silent Sacrifice Star are extremely fierce. If I don't leave, I will probably die in the mouths of those wild beasts sooner or later, so I can only take the capsule spaceship and come out for help." Dallas continued to nod. Just as he was about to ask Li Ming something else, there was a sudden buzzing sound in the sky, and bursts of lights flashed. An elliptical spaceship had slowly descended. Dallas and others looked up, and showed puzzled expressions from time to time. Li Ming was confused at first, but his expression was calm, just waiting to see what was going on. After a while, the spaceship stopped steadily in the air, motionless. At the same time, a blue beam of light shot out from the bottom of the spaceship. 3 figures in the beam of light slowly landed. They were Rivers, and others from the Galastar. Before the 3 landed, they were already staring at Li Ming and talking to each other. Their faces were sometimes stern, sometimes sinister, and strange and changeable. "Is it him?" "It's exactly the same as the information image sent by Adriana." Robbie Ross even pointed his finger at Li Ming. How could Rivers not see it? But his expression was calm and composed. As his eyes turned, the other 3 figures also came into view. Looking at this situation, Rivers said slowly, "Adriana said that catching that person is the top priority. Other aliens can be ignored for now, and act according to circumstances." As he said this, the figures of the 3 people slowly landed in the blue light. Rivers' eyes were very firm, staring straight at Li Ming, and his feet also walked quickly towards Li Ming. The 3 people were aggressive and stern, and stopped more than 10 meters away from Li Ming. At this time, the 3 people did not even glance at Dallas and others who were also not far away. Chapter 293 I have to leave quickly. Li Ming stood still, his eyes like a scanner, looking back and forth. His narrowed eyes were not looking at the appearance of these people, but exploring the depths of their brains. The more he looked, the more Li Ming knew, and his originally calm expression began to become a little serious. The reason why there were 2 replies to his help message was also clear at this time, but what shocked Li Ming even more was that Adriana had actually chased to the Chaos Galaxy and was rushing here. All the information related to Li Ming was clear, and his nerves were already tense. There was only one thought in his mind: this place should not be stayed for long. Before Rivers and his men arrived, Li Ming was still thinking about dealing with Dallas and his men simply, and then asking for the coordinates to Galastar. But now it seems that not only can he not go to Galastar, but Li Ming also has to evacuate quickly. Rivers glanced at Dallas and the others, snorted, and said, "We are here for this person. You alien civilizations had better not interfere in this matter." As he spoke, Rivers winked at Robbie Ross beside him. Robbie Ross immediately understood. His eyes flashed with cold light, and he looked at Li Ming fiercely. He moved his body and suddenly jumped up. He clenched his right fist and smashed it at Li Ming's position. He didn't say a few words, and started to attack directly, which surprised Dallas and the others. The whole fist was blazing with fire. These flames were not like ordinary flames that burned in a ball-shaped flame, but in a bursting way. It was like there were strips of fire blades constantly shooting out of the fist. The sound of pa was endless. Each bursting fire blade was more than 1 foot long, covering a diameter of 1 or 2 meters, which looked shocking. Li Ming didn't dare to take this blow head on. With the flashing of electric light, his figure suddenly flashed, and quickly avoided it. Bang! With a violent muffled sound, Robbie Ross's fist hit the ground heavily. As the fist touched the ground, the fire blades that were only about 1 foot long instantly expanded several times and became giant fire blades several meters long. The fire blades flew, and the high temperature radiated. Even though Li Ming had avoided them from a distance, he could still sense the power of the fire blades. Although the high temperature and the fire blades were strong, the ground did not break and explode like ordinary rocks, because the ground here was made of high density metal, so it was extremely hard. However, under the high temperature, the ground actually showed a little red light. These little red lights were not dazzling, but more prominent and conspicuous, but people around could see at a glance that the red light was because some iron, or on the surface, was melted by the high temperature. Such a high temperature. Li Ming was secretly shocked. The opponent's attack also revealed the direction of the opponent's ability, elemental warfare, and fire attribute. After the attack missed, Robbie Ross remained calm, as if he had expected it. He stood up slowly, his feet were all molten iron. No flames could be seen, but the high temperature had made the air tremble slightly, which could be seen with the naked eye. He looked at Li Ming fiercely, as if to say, "You know how powerful I am." The opponent's attack was very strong, which surprised Li Ming a little, but he didn't take it seriously. He just felt that the tactics in front of him seemed to be more powerful than the tactics he had seen before. Dallas watched from a distance, knowing very well that this attack was also showing off the opponent's strength to him, warning him not to interfere. But Dallas still glanced at Damon from the corner of his eye. He whispered, "Dallas' life and death are unknown. This guy is even more important to us." Understood. Damon simply replied with 2 words, and his figure shook and disappeared on the spot. Almost at the same time, Robbie Ross stood up, his eyes tightened, and his bean-sized eyeballs fixed in his eye sockets, locking on Li Ming's position. Swoosh! With the sound of flames streaking through the air, Robbie Ross ran towards Li Ming again. Li Ming had already prepared himself, but before he could make a move, a black shadow suddenly appeared in front of him, and at the same time, a hand swung out quickly, facing the flaming Robbie Ross. Faced with this suddenly appearing black shadow, Robbie Ross was slightly surprised, but it was impossible for him to stop his hand. On the contrary, he used more force on his fist. Boom. The dazzling flames instantly filled the sky, and the fire blades spread out from the center of the fist, causing strong winds to rise in the air around, and the flames surrounded him. But these fire blades and flames could only flash around, unable to get close to Li Ming at all, as if they were blocked by a transparent wall. And it was Damon who stood in front of Li Ming, his thick palm with 5 fingers spread out, forcibly blocking Robbie Ross's flaming fist. The palm and the fist were not in direct contact. In the middle of the two was the flame and the white barrier. The white barrier was released by Damon, blocking all the flames outside. After a moment, the barrier disappeared, the flames dissipated, and Robbie Ross quickly retreated. As soon as he landed, He cast strange eyes on Damon, and the corners of his mouth could not help but rise, revealing a trace of surprise, as if he had a great interest in this opponent. Damon, who was sturdy, had a calm expression, slowly retracted his right hand, looked at the other party coldly, and said nothing. Seeing this, Rivers, who was far away, immediately turned his eyes to Dallas and said sternly, "What do you mean? You want to stand up for this kid?" Dallas snorted lightly and said, "He is a friend of our Dominicans, you should stop here." Although Rivers was a little dissatisfied, he didn't care too much, as if he had already made up his mind. At this time, Li Ming had already seen through the other party's intentions. The people present were basically 9th level beings. It was impossible to determine the winner between them in a short period of time, but as long as Adriana arrived, everything would be difficult. After confirming that the Dominicans were on his side, Li Ming suddenly chuckled, and a green light suddenly flashed in his right hand. He exerted force on his feet, and flew out quickly. Li Ming had already been under the attention of Rivers and others, and his sudden action at this time attracted their attention. Herman was the first to make a sound of surprise. Under his gaze, Li Ming was running towards him. When the two were about to do something, Li Ming suddenly pulled back his right hand, as if he was going to pull something out. With this action, the ground under Herman and Rivers' feet suddenly made a muffled bang 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 sound. 7 or 8 black vines grew out quickly from under their feet. The reaction speed of the two was fast enough, and they jumped into the air to avoid it. Li Ming had predicted this long ago. He had already gathered enough energy in his left hand, and a white light flashed, and a giant electromagnetic bird flew out of his hand. There were vines below, and an electromagnetic bird above, which surprised Rivers and Herman, but they could not stop their upward bodies, so they could only try to break through the electromagnetic bird. Bang! A blinding white light flashed, and almost at the same time, the vines underground quickly extended over. Li Ming's feet slowly landed on the ground, and his head turned slightly, to look at the vines in the sky. The previous attacks were completed in an instant. At this time, Herman and Rivers were tightly entangled by the vines, and could not move at all. Under the attack of electromagnetic waves, the bodies of the two were pitch black, as if they had just been seen by high temperatures. The diameter of the vines tightly entangled the two, and the tops of the vines swayed in front of the two like sharp thorns, as if they could pierce their bodies at any time. Rivers and Herman's faces were extremely ugly, and they were at a loss in their terrified expressions. They could only tremble as they looked at the vines swaying in front of them. Li Ming's move stunned everyone present, because in their eyes, Li Ming might be just an ordinary 9th level, but they didn't expect that Li Ming would subdue 2 9th levels in an instant with one move. This guy, actually. Dallas was looking at Li Ming at this time. His eyes had changed. In addition to respect, there was also a bit of fear. Li Ming ignored these people, turned his eyes, looked at the triangular spaceship in the air, then looked at Dallas and others, and said, "Your spaceship, lend it to me." As he spoke, Li Ming had already walked towards their triangular spaceship. The reason why he chose Dallas's spaceship was entirely because the Dominican's technological spaceship was more advanced, and was a product of advanced civilization, which was more conducive to Li Ming's avoidance of Adriana's pursuit. However, Li Ming's request was obviously excessive. Dallas moved his body, and just when he was about to do something, he saw a sudden flash of fire in the sky. Robbie Ross shouted angrily, "You bastard. Don't even think about escaping." As soon as the voice came, the flaming fist had already descended. Li Ming's slightly narrowed eyes suddenly turned, and his right hand swung out. Swoosh! A black vine like a bucket suddenly grew out from the ground, and the diameter of the vine blocked Li Ming's body, like a thick metal rod. Bang! Chapter 294 Grey Cave. Robbie Ross's fist smashed directly, and the flames scattered, but they were all blocked by the vines. Vines are just plants after all. Robbie Ross's flames have just been demonstrated. The vines in front of him are unstoppable according to common sense. However, this vine is extremely hard, and is safe and sound under the fist. Robbie Ross's shocked face changed instantly. Before the other party could do anything, the top of the vine suddenly forked. It was originally like a sharp thorn, but after forking, it turned into 4 or 5 sharp thorns. There were only a few pa sounds, just like a bullet passing through the body. The forked vine top pierced Robbie Ross's back and pierced his body in many parts, like an irregular fork piercing Robbie Ross. Blood flowed out from the wound. Robbie Ross's eyes widened a little, his face was stiff, and he stammered and couldn't say a word. Dallas, standing in the distance, also opened his eyes wide in surprise. From his point of view, when Robbie Ross's fist just arrived, a vine grew out of the ground beside Li Ming. The root of the vine was the thickest part, which just blocked the opponent's attack, but the vine did not stop growing. After a turn in the air, it used the sharp top fork to attack multiple parts. It was done in one go, and at a very fast speed. Li Ming looked at Robbie Ross with contempt and said coldly, "What kind of geology will grow what kind of vine? On this heavy metal planet, your attack is fragile." Having said that, Li Ming continued to walk towards the triangular spaceship. Dallas, who was originally ready to stop Li Ming, had given up the idea at this moment and could only watch Li Ming walk towards his spaceship. Even Damon and Dagmar had no objection at this time because they had witnessed Li Ming's strength. Arriving directly below the triangular spaceship, Li Ming raised his hand and pointed at the sky. A beam of green light shot out from his hand. With a bang sound, the green light dispersed on the surface of the triangle, spreading out like circles of ripples. The energy shield of the triangular spaceship had already faded when it landed. Li Ming just tested it and confirmed that there was no energy shield. Li Ming smiled slightly, and his figure floated up and flew towards the spaceship. Looking at this scene, Dallas stood there quietly, his eyes blank, not knowing what to do. "Our spaceship is just given to him like this?" Dagmar said casually, and there seemed to be some objections. But just as she said this, Li Ming's figure in the air suddenly turned over here, looking at Dallas and Dagmar coldly. Dagmar felt a thump in his heart and slowly lowered his head. He didn't dare to say anything, but he was shocked by Li Ming's look. Dallas and Damon also became slightly nervous and seemed to be very worried that Li Ming would suddenly stop and attack them. However, Li Ming did not mean that. He just snorted and continued to fly towards the spaceship. Watching Li Ming enter the spaceship, Dallas did not move until the triangular spaceship flew away. After confirming that Li Ming had flown away from this area, he suddenly came to his senses. Turning his eyes to check around, Rebers and others were already trapped by vines, and another was already dying under the attack of the vines. Turning his eyes around, he finally stopped on the oval spaceship. Looking at the oval spaceship, Dallas shook his body and said, "Let's go." As soon as the three words came out, he quickly approached the oval spaceship. Dagmar and Damon did not dare to hesitate and quickly followed. At this moment, a silver round spaceship had arrived in the outer space of Sakostar, but the spaceship did not land, but just stayed in outer space. Adriana in the main cabin looked at the operating table in front of her and saw that a light spot had moved away from Sakostar and was heading towards the outer periphery of the Chaos Galaxy. "It's still a step too late. We can't let Neton go just like that." "But, Dominicans." Adriana was a little entangled in her heart. Adriana needed to be careful about the Dominicans. This was an order from the top. The Milky Way was now surrounded by enemies, and it was inconvenient to conflict with the civilization of the Canis Major Dwarf Galaxy. However, it was also very important for Li Ming to carry Neton. After struggling for a moment, Adriana made up her mind and pointed her finger on the operating table, locking the direction in which Li Ming left. She was planning to continue chasing Li Ming. At this time, Li Ming stood in the huge cabin and was amazed by the spaceship in front of him. The first thing was the operating mirror floating in the air. This thing was similar to the operating table, but the difference was that the operating mirror was more convenient and advanced. Li Ming didn't have to sit near the operating table like before. No matter where he was in the main cabin, this operating mirror could float over to provide convenience for his operation. But while Li Ming was enjoying this product of advanced scientific and technological civilization, a light spot suddenly appeared on the operating mirror. This light spot followed Li Ming closely, so it also attracted Li Ming's attention. "That is," Li Ming whispered to himself. But the next moment, a message came. "You can't run away." Adriana's voice suddenly came out, and this was the content of the message. Hearing the other party's voice again, Li Ming's face changed slightly, but his expression was natural. Without any reply, Li Ming just pointed casually, and the green light rippled on the mirror, and all the safe coordinates nearby were already revealed. Li Ming randomly selected one and ignored it. In terms of the performance of the spacecraft, Adriana was driving a product of the first level civilization, and its comprehensive ability far exceeded all the spacecrafts that Li Ming had known before. But the spacecraft Li Ming was driving now was not weak at all. Because this spacecraft was also a product of the first level civilization. In other words, there was also a first level civilization in the fleet of Dominic Star. The technical direction of the spacecraft may be different, but the overall performance is not much different. With this, Li Ming was not so worried. The spacecraft started to transmit according to the randomly selected route, and Li Ming also walked around leisurely in the spacecraft and looked around. The products of advanced civilizations are different from those of low-level civilizations. They are all technologies that people cannot understand. As a low-level civilization, Li Ming is full of curiosity about them. Everything and every place is what Li Ming is extremely curious about. As he watched, Li Ming came to the bulkhead. This bulkhead was different from the others. A round gray screen kept flashing. There was no picture on the gray screen, just a gray haze. I don't know what it is used for, just like a piece of gray cloth. This is the only place in the entire cabin. The other bulkheads are ordinary and nothing special. What is this? Li Ming said to himself curiously, his eyes moving back and forth on it. After watching for a while, Li Ming slowly stretched out his right hand, aimed at this gray place, and lightly touched it, just like a dragonfly touching the water. His fingers lightly touched it. Just with such a light touch, the gray screen suddenly flashed and twisted, and a picture appeared. In the picture, there was a charming alien with a round head, but not big regular facial features, and very beautiful. This was also the first time Li Ming saw an alien beauty that Li Ming thought was pretty good, since he arrived on the alien planet. However, after seeing Li Ming, the alien showed a look of surprise. His eyes turned, and he said in surprise, "Who are you? Where is Dallas?" Li Ming was shocked to hear this, and then he realized that the charming alien in front of him was indeed somewhat similar to Dallas. But before Li Ming could reply, the camera suddenly turned slightly and turned to another alien. This person had the same appearance as the previous alien, but he was tall and was sitting quietly on a high place. His majestic face was full of coldness. Li Ming could sense the other party's powerful aura through the screen. The deterrent power of the aura was not something that a 9th level civilization could release, which made Li Ming a little nervous. It seems the pioneer was occupied by the civilization of your chaos galaxy. On the stiff face, there was no expression, and the cold voice blew into Li Ming's heart like a cold wind. However, Li Ming's consciousness soon realized the use of this gray screen. This is the technological device that is connected to the mothership separately. This device is called the Grey Hole. Li Ming had heard of it when he was on Earth before. The information transmission of the Grey Hole has no time and distance restrictions. It can instantly connect and transmit information, no matter where it is. It is an extremely powerful technological product. However, Li Ming is not interested in studying this Grey Hole at the moment. His eyes are already fixed on the tall alien, and there seems to be some image in his mind. Li Ming has some impression of the tall figure opposite him, because from Dallas' memory, Li Ming has seen this guy. This person is called Millicent, the leader of Dallas, a first-level civilization. Thinking of this information, Li Ming first felt a little worried, because Li Ming has seen the strength of the first-level civilization, and every time he thinks of it, he will inevitably feel a little scared. But thinking about his position again, there is no need to worry. Looking at Millicent, some other thoughts emerged in Li Ming's mind. His originally tense expression suddenly relaxed. He smiled disdainfully at the gray screen and said, "Occupy the Vanguard? TSK, our target is your spaceship. Our boss hates you invaders so much that he is not afraid to send you the information of his spaceship. After all, our boss is a first-class civilization." Chapter 295. Angry Millicent. "What did you say?" Harsh words burst out from Millicent's teeth. Her eyes slightly widened, and her cold expression could no longer conceal her anger. Li Ming still had a natural look, but when he saw the other party's angry expression, he couldn't help but feel a little scared. This fear came from the bottom of his heart and was completely uncontrollable. Maybe this was the deterrence that advanced civilizations bring. Although he was obviously very scared, Li Ming still pretended to be indifferent. He snorted disdainfully and said, "Okay, I won't talk nonsense with you. I'll give you the information of our boss's spaceship later, and you just need to find her." As he spoke, Li Ming had already transmitted the information about the silver spaceship through the gray screen and quickly closed the connection. After doing all this, Li Ming turned back to his seat in the main cabin. After taking a few deep breaths, his mind gradually calmed down. However, Li Ming still felt strange. If they were all first level civilizations, why didn't Li Ming have such a strong fear of Adriana? After a slight sigh, Li Ming stopped thinking about it. At this time, the operating mirror slowly floated over. Li Ming's eyes scanned the information on it and suddenly widened his eyes. From the information on the operating mirror, Adriana's spaceship was still following Li Ming, like two constantly changing light spots. Although the other party could not catch up with Li Ming could not get rid of the other party in a short time. This made Li Ming frown, and he said to himself viciously, "I'm really entangled by this guy. I can't get rid of him." In fact, Li Ming just talked casually with Millicent just now, hoping to cause some trouble to Adriana, but he didn't really think that Millicent would stop Adriana, but at least it would affect the other party's pursuit of him. But from the current position, it seemed to have no effect. Although Li Ming's move was intentional, Millicent took it seriously. In the giant circular spaceship in the middle of the fleet at the edge of the Chaos Galaxy, Millicent looked at the operating mirror in front of her with an extremely ugly expression. After glancing at the charming alien next to her, she whispered, "Alara, search for that spaceship according to that information." Alara nodded and responded, "Yes." The information sent by Li Ming appeared on the operating mirror, which was a circular silver spaceship, and the operating mirror had begun to search the entire Chaos Galaxy. While doing this, a connection request popped up on the console again, and Alara clicked it. At this time, the operating mirror continued to search for the silver spaceship, while displaying a picture, which was Dallas and others. "Dallas!" Alara shouted in surprise. Dallas and the screen ignored Alara, looked at Millicent with uneasiness, and said, "Millicent, no need to say more. I already know." Before the other party finished speaking, Millicent had already stopped him, and at the same time, a bit of anger appeared on her face, saying, "I originally wanted to enter the Milky Way peacefully, but it seems that it is not possible. Since you are still alive, then lead the fleet according to the original plan. I need to deal with one person alone, so I will arrive at Galahad later." As she spoke, her eyes were already looking at the search screen. Dallas was stunned when he heard this, and he didn't understand the reason, but after hesitating for a while, he replied, "Yes, Lady Millicent." The connection was then disconnected, and at the same time, information about the silver spaceship had also emerged. The round spaceship was silver in color, and had a smooth and bright appearance. It was obvious that it was not a product of a low-level civilization. She stared at it for a few seconds and said, "The boss of the phenomenon galaxy, we really need to meet for a while." Millicent whispered to herself, as if she had made some plans. At this time, Alara beside her also said, "Boss, then, what about the Pioneer?" Millicent glanced at Alara beside her with contempt, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Leave the Pioneer to Winslow." "Yes," Alara replied. Millicent's eyes were still fixed on the operating mirror. At this time, the mirror was already showing the entire phenomenon star system, with stars and all her planets in it. Staring at them like this, Millicent slowly stood up and said coldly, "Open the door to the Milky Way from here." As she spoke, the structure of the entire fleet had changed. The giant circular spaceship remained in the middle, and the 10 U-shaped spaceships on the left and right sides began to break away from the fleet and quickly headed straight ahead. The V-shaped spaceship behind the circular spaceship also broke away from the fleet and flew to the side. In the main cabin of the V-shaped spaceship, an alien with a head like a flower pot, but one eye stood up from his seat, looked at the operating mirror coldly, and said, "I have said it before, only war will be respected. You swore to create a home for our Dominican civilization. Ha ha ha." The change in the fleet was the strategic adjustment of the Dominicans. Dallas and others who were in the airspace near the Sacco Star were talking in the main cabin of an elliptical spaceship. Dallas looked at the console in front of him and said, "It seems war is inevitable. The fleet is approaching Galahad directly, but Lady Millicent and Lord Winslow. From the radar map on the console, 10 ships are approaching this side, while the other 2 are moving in other directions." Dagmar also looked at the changes on the console and said, "What made Lady Millicent and Lord Winslow go out together?" Damon also looked at Dallas curiously, but Dallas looked solemn. After hesitating for a moment, he said, "If you want to anger Lady Millicent, just a few simple ridicules are enough. The practice of that star makes her more and more irritable." Dagmar's face changed when he heard this. His mind flashed quickly. He opened his mouth and hesitated for a moment before saying, You mean, that kid user, Grey Hole connection, and then angered Lady Millicent?" Dallas still had a stiff face. After a moment, he replied, "It's not clear yet, but occupying Galahad is the most important thing for us right now." Dallas didn't say the reason clearly, but Dagmar seemed to have guessed it. His panicked expression was full of fear. Even Damon, who was standing next to him, showed a panic expression. Everyone knew that Millicent was very scary when she was angry. At this moment, the spaceship that Li Ming was riding was still transmitting in the form of light spots, but behind him, Adriana was following closely, like opponents chasing each other on the highway. Li Ming's calmness at the beginning also became unnatural, and his face gradually darkened. "We still can't get rid of the other party at this rate." Li Ming's face showed a worried look. The spaceship was leaving the Chaos Galaxy little by little, and Li Ming was thinking about countermeasures in his mind. If he couldn't get rid of the other party, wouldn't he have to keep teleporting in the universe, and the energy in the spaceship would be exhausted. But at that time, Li Ming would be in real danger. The thoughts in his mind turned quickly. His eyes stared at the operating mirror, and his right hand supported his chin. After a few seconds, Li Ming's face suddenly changed, and he looked as if he had suddenly realized something. His eyes flickered slightly, and he had remembered something. He turned his right hand and placed it in front of him with his palm facing up. The palm of his hand flashed with blue light, and a black object appeared. This object was the size of an egg, black in color, flat, and had strange runes on the surface. It was the star map key. This star map key corresponds to the Croft Galaxy, a prison galaxy in the planetary belt, which is extremely dangerous. If you want to enter, you can only rely on the star map key in your hand. Since only the star map key can enter, it means that only the current Li Ming can enter, and Adriana cannot enter. This is undoubtedly the best way to avoid Adriana. Thinking of this in his mind, Li Ming's mouth showed a slight smile, and at the same time, a green light flashed on his right hand, and the star map key was completely wrapped in the green light. The green light is Li Ming's spiritual ability. Under the urging of spiritual power, the coordinates of the location of the Croft Galaxy and the star map key have emerged. It is not easy to enter the Croft Galaxy. Even if you have the star map key, it takes a lot of trouble. But since he has decided to go, Li Ming has begun to prepare for it. After determining the location of the Croft Galaxy, Li Ming raised his hand and pointed at the operating mirror. The coordinates to the Croft Galaxy have entered the system of the spacecraft through the operating mirror. Under the control of Li Ming's consciousness, the spacecraft listed these coordinates as the next destination, and a route map was generated on the operating mirror, and the transmission began. After doing this, Li Ming smiled slightly, and his eyes returned to the star map key in his hand. At the same time, near the distant Bidet galaxy, a long barrel-shaped spaceship was flying slowly. This spaceship was the critical point of the Central Joint Space Station. Station Master McCree sat quietly in front of a meteorite table, looking at a green crystal ball in his hand. The starlight in the crystal ball was like a universe. As he was watching carefully, the portal on the cabin wall suddenly flickered slightly, and a figure walked out. Chapter 296, Croft Prison Galaxy. This person was dressed in black, and looked like a human. To be exact, he looked like Adriana, but the only difference was the color of his body, and there was also a long sword on his back. Station Master. The black figure bowed deeply to McCree as soon as he appeared. McCree nodded slightly, looking him up and down, and said, "As Adriana's sister, you seem to be more calm. At least you know what is the most important thing." In this regard, you are much better than her, Adriwini. Adriwini lowered her head slightly and said nothing. McCree slowly stood up and continued, speaking of the First Galaxy War, it was still the battle with the Large Magellanic Cloud and the Small Magellanic Cloud for the energy and resources of our Milky Way. Although we won that battle, we know that they will definitely come back again. Only by occupying the Milky Way and obtaining the resources here can they survive, but this is a very bad thing for us. McCree walked towards Adriwini while speaking, and continued, if we win, there will be a long period of peace. If we fail, we may be destroyed, or we may coexist with them in the Milky Way. No matter which result, we cannot accept it, because resources and energy are limited, so it is important to be prepared to respond at any time. As he continued to speak, McCree had already stood in front of Adriwini. He stared at each other with his eyes, hesitated for a moment, and said, now your sister has messed up. She didn't stay in the Chaos Galaxy. We know nothing about the situation there, so, you need to clean up your sister's ass. Yes. Adriwini bowed her head again and said. McCree waved his hand gently and said, the Canis Major Galaxy may have occupied there. The purpose of my sending you there is to stabilize them, because we cannot add more troubles at this critical moment. According to the intelligence we know, the Large Magellanic Cloud and the Small Magellanic Cloud have united with the Pegasus Galaxy. These satellite galaxies of the Milky Way want to attack us. We cannot let the Canis Major Galaxy join in. The known intelligence shows that the Canis Major Galaxy has no such plan, so your mission this time is very difficult. McCree said very seriously. Adriwini has realized the seriousness of the situation. After bowing his head slightly, he replied, Station Master, don't worry, I will definitely handle this matter. McCree smiled slightly after hearing this, waved his hand, and said, go. Adriwini then stepped back and left. At this moment, Li Ming's spaceship was approaching a dangerous galaxy, the Croft Galaxy. This is a complex planetary belt, and it is also the critical point between the outer system and the middle system. However, the critical point here is an extremely dangerous critical point, and any carelessness will lead to death. There are all kinds of creatures in the complex airspace. Even the spacecraft of advanced civilization cannot pass through this area directly. Therefore, this place is completely unknown, just like a car coming to a sandstorm. You don't know what will appear inside. The fear of the unknown is terrifying. The only thing that can detect the path is a star map key. Li Ming's spacecraft is now floating in the airspace near the planetary belt. He no longer moves forward. He flips his right hand and takes out the star map key. The black star map key glows faintly in Li Ming's palm. The characters on it flicker gently, releasing strange energy. Li Ming narrows his eyes slightly, and the energy gathers on his right hand. The sign halo wraps the whole palm. Suddenly, the whole star map key begins to tremble slightly, and it floats away from the palm little by little into the air. Above the main cabin, the star map key suddenly turns. After a bang, the star map key breaks like a stone. The debris rotates and flies in the air, forming a huge nebula map. Each fragment emits light, and the light of the fragments echoes each other to form a huge pattern. Various starstones in the pattern float, as if the pattern in front of him is imitating a certain nebula. Li Ming looked at this scene, and couldn't help but marvel. The macroscopic picture seemed to be a real cosmic stardust map. Li Ming opened his eyes wide, and his mind was immersed in it. After a few seconds, the light suddenly disappeared, and all the debris quickly accumulated and merged, and the originally broken star map key was restored again. Li Ming raised his hand lightly, and the star map key slowly fell back to the palm of his hand. The green light in the palm of his hand still existed, but after sensing the star map key that fell back, Li Ming's eyes widened a little, and he said, safe coordinates. As soon as the voice fell, Li Ming quickly waved his left hand, and pointed at the operating mirror in front of him. Ripples flashed, and a blurry place appeared on the operating mirror. This place is located in the planetary belt. Nothing can be seen with the eyes, but the place corresponding to the coordinates has been locked by the spacecraft system. The surface of the spacecraft flashed with light, just like a reflective mirror. After the light, the triangular spacecraft disappeared on the spot. A buzzing sound rang in his ears, and the spaceship trembled slightly. In an airspace, the spaceship flashed out in a burst of white light. Li Ming was also startled when he sensed the vibration. because in the previous transmission, this spaceship had never experienced this phenomenon. Now the sudden tremor made Li Ming feel a little uneasy. Looking at the operating mirror, Li Ming was a little stunned. At this time, through the operating mirror, Li Ming could see the situation outside the spaceship. Around Li Ming's triangular spaceship, giant meteorites were flying everywhere, as if the spaceship was flying with a pile of meteorites. At this time, if a fast meteorite hit him, Li Ming would be in danger. Staying for one more minute would be dangerous. Li Ming's mind immediately entered the star map key in his hand. After more than 10 seconds of sensing, the next transmission coordinates had appeared. Li Ming's left hand quickly clicked again. The spaceship trembled and entered the transmission again. Li Ming continued to transmit, and a silver spaceship had just been transmitted in the airspace near the planetary belt. Facing the planetary belt in front of him, the silver spaceship could only stop here. In the main cabin, Adriana looked at the planetary belt on the console in front of her, and whispered in anger and confusion, "This guy. Could it be that he has entered the planetary belt?" Whispering like this, Adriana continued to check the galaxy information in this area. After flipping through it for a while, Adriana suddenly opened her eyes wide. The Croft Prison Galaxy. Impossible. No one can enter without the star map key. Adriana was talking to herself in confusion, and the horizontal console suddenly rolled up, like boiling water, and all the previous information disappeared, and a black shadow slowly rose from it. Seeing the black shadow, Adriana's face changed slightly, and she couldn't help whispering, "Sister." After a few seconds, a complete figure appeared on the console, all black, and the appearance was exactly the same as Adriana. It was Adriwini. "The station master is very dissatisfied with what you are doing now. No matter what you are doing now, return to the Chaos Galaxy immediately. I'm also on my way there," Adriwini said coldly. The sister's dissatisfaction with her sister was written all over her face, and Adriana was silent for a while, and could only nod slightly and said, "Yes." Adriwini didn't say anything more. After a displeased cold snort, the phantom began to slowly disappear, and returned to the operating table. Adriwini's image disappeared, and the previous planetary belt appeared on the operating table again. Adriana looked at the planetary belt in front of her unwillingly. Her helpless eyes were full of anger, but at this time she had no other choice but to give up chasing Li Ming and return to the Chaos Galaxy. At this time, after several teleportations, Li Ming's spaceship finally entered a galaxy. The picture of the entire galaxy has emerged on the operating mirror. The Croft Galaxy. This star system has a total of 4 huge planets, which are also the 4 prisons here. Among these 4 planets, the most important planet is Delano, which is the main control base of the prison, including the prison's defense agency, the prisoner's interrogation agency, etc. The second is Bergson, which is the main agency after Delano. It not only has an interrogation agency, but also an experimental agency. Its status is also very important. Regarding the location of the agency here, there are detailed records on the star map key, but there are no detailed star systems in the person in charge or the agency. Li Ming only took a rough look and didn't pay much attention because Li Ming now has no plan to land on these planets. After seeing the overall environment of this star system, Li Ming's expression was complicated. Chapter 297 Landing on Bergson Planet. The Croft Galaxy is located in the planetary belt, which means that under the gravitational force of the star, comets in the planetary belt will continue to enter the galaxy, which invisibly increases the possibility of planetary collisions. This is devastating for any life on it. Although this place is full of crises, it is not absolutely dangerous, because powerful weapons are installed on the 4 planets. If a meteorite or comet approaches, it can be directly destroyed by weapons. But in general, this place is not suitable for living. Li Ming looked at all this from the operating mirror and just shook his head slightly, and took out the star map key again. The Croft Galaxy is located in the middle of the planetary belt, with the outer system at one end and the middle system at the other. Li Ming, who has the star map key, can enter the middle system through here. This is also a good opportunity for Li Ming. Thinking of this in his heart, Li Ming prepared to restart the star map key in his hand, to find the safe coordinates, to enter the middle system. With his eyes slightly closed, his mind concentrated, and his mental power was injected into the star map key again with green light. After more than 10 seconds, Li Ming's brows wrinkled slightly, his eyes twitched slightly, and he took a deep breath. His eyes opened slowly and involuntarily, and he turned his eyes and looked at the star map key in his hand, whispering, "Why is it not there? It shouldn't be." Li Ming suddenly became worried, staring at the star map key in his hand with puzzled eyes. According to Li Ming's cognitive records, the star map key is a tool developed for this kind of exclusive institution, and it is needed to enter and exit this area. As the prison of the advanced civilization of the Middle System, the Croft star system naturally has a path to enter and exit the Middle System civilization, so why is there no one in his hand? Li Ming fell into deep thought. After a moment, Li Ming's eyes widened a little, and his expression had already thought of the possible reason. He couldn't help but muttered, could it be that this star map key is a one-way star map key? The development of the star map key is not easy. According to common sense, it is divided into the main star map key, the backup star map key, and the one-way copy star map key. The main star map key is collected by the senior officials of the Middle System civilization. The backup star map key is held by the warden, and the one-way copy star map key is held by the material supply personnel. Judging from the star map key in Li Ming's hand, it is very likely to be a one-way copy of the star map key. Li Ming looked at the star map key in his hand and shook his head slightly, whispering, if this is the case, then how can I enter the Chinese system? With a long sigh, Li Ming could only helplessly clench his palm and put away the star map key, and his eyes returned to the operating mirror in front of him. On the operating mirror, the 4 planets were still rotating. Li Ming stared at these planets and pondered secretly. But at this moment, a message suddenly entered Li Ming's operating mirror. Li Ming immediately became alert after seeing this message. After sitting up a little, he stretched out his right hand. A message from Bergson Star has appeared on the operating mirror. Please go to Bergson Freda base for identity verification, otherwise it will be directly destroyed. Please go to Bergson Freda base for identity verification, otherwise it will be directly destroyed. After several messages, Li Ming showed a cautious look. It was obvious that his spaceship had been discovered by the other party, which made Li Ming hesitate. At the moment, when Li Ming hesitated, a new message came again. You have been locked. As soon as he saw this message, Li Ming quickly raised his hand and pointed at the screen. Li Ming immediately replied to this message. Confirmed to land on Bergson Star for inspection. Li Ming replied in a hurry. Although he had replied, Li Ming still looked nervous, because Li Ming knew that the attack system of the Croft Galaxy was very advanced, and could even destroy meteorites and comets, let alone a spaceship. After a few seconds, a series of coordinates were transmitted to Li Ming's spaceship. These safe coordinates were sent from Bergson Star. The entire transmission route of the coordinates was from Li Ming's current location to Bergson Star. Even the landing point on Bergson Star was marked in detail. Li Ming had no choice but to accept these coordinates and let the spaceship system transmit according to these coordinates. Li Ming was not very clear about the real structure of the prison system. The only remaining prison in his mind was when he was on Mars. That was Li Ming's first stop after leaving Earth, the Ulysses mine, which was also a prison area. But that was a prison of a low-level civilization, so it was naturally different from here. Feeling uneasy in his heart, the spacecraft was also teleported to Bergson Star little by little. Half a day later, a large building on Bergson Star was surrounded by many people. These people looked up at the sky, each with a solemn expression, both expectant and cautious, because a triangular spacecraft was slowly descending from the sky. This spacecraft was the triangular spacecraft driven by Li Ming. After arriving in the air more than 10 meters above the ground, the spacecraft stopped still. After a few seconds, a white light shot out from the bottom of the spacecraft. The white light was scattered, like a searchlight, and under the light, a figure was slowly descending. This person was Li Ming. While landing, Li Ming's eyes had begun to look around. The surrounding buildings and the number of alien levels below were all taken in by Li Ming. The first thing that caught my eye was the crowd below. There were 2 9th rank and more than a dozen 7th rank. Each of them was wearing black armor and had a blue sword on their backs, just like an army. These people had heads like monkeys, but without hair. Their heads were bald. Everyone had a serious expression and stood firmly, as if they had undergone rigorous training. From these appearances, it can be seen that the people guarding the prison here are all very regular armies of alien civilizations, just like human soldiers, majestic and intimidating. Not far behind them is a huge building. The appearance of this building is somewhat like a rocket. The building in the middle is tall and straight, like a high-rise building with nearly 1,000 floors. The surrounding buildings are relatively short, with only more than 100 floors. Because these buildings are closely stacked together, it looks like there is only one building. Not far from this building is a circular building. The area is not large, like a big bowl on the ground, and it looks like a deserted place. Looking further out from the building, it was dark, foggy, and black, and grey. In the haze, some black shadows could be seen, not sure if they were buildings or other objects. Li Ming took in all this information with a glance, and his feet had already landed slowly. Without waiting for Li Ming to do anything, the aliens from the 7th Order civilization pulled out the blue swords from their backs and quickly surrounded Li Ming. Li Ming did not move, looking around, not paying much attention. These 7th Order civilizations obviously would not pose a threat to Li Ming, but the weapons in their hands made Li Ming look at them a few more times. The surface of the blue light sword was full of energy, and the sword body released powerful cutting energy. It was a product of advanced scientific and technological civilization. Although these 7th Order civilizations were not scary, the weapons in their hands were still worthy of Li Ming's vigilance. In terms of instruments, scientific and technological civilization was dominant, and the weapons in the instruments could even be mass-produced by scientific and technological civilization. These weapons did not belong to Stardust weapons, but their power was comparable to that of Stardust weapons, so they were also divided according to the level of Stardust weapons. After encircling Li Ming, one of the 9th Order aliens took a few steps forward and came close to Li Ming. He stared at Li Ming and said, "Who are you, and why did you come to Croft?" Li Ming narrowed his eyes and looked at the two 9th Order aliens. He smiled slightly and said, "I came to deliver supplies." Li Ming could answer like this because of the information he saw with his wisdom eyes. The Croft galaxy has almost no other energy sources except the light energy of stars, so the demand for energy is very huge. In addition to energy, various materials are also urgently needed. The supply of energy is provided by the central system, and the supply of materials is provided by the external system. Both are important for maintaining the operation of Croft. From the information obtained from the other party's brain, it is known that the spacecraft responsible for the external system procurement has not returned for a long time. So Li Ming said this. The two 9th Order aliens are named Boner and Asibi, and they are the highest leaders of the Bergson Experimental Institute. Ashby was the 9th rank cultivator who first questioned Li Ming. After hearing Li Ming's answer, Ashby's expression suddenly changed. After hesitating for a moment, he asked, "Where is Hancock? Who are you?" If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 298. I'm actually an alchemist. Hancock was the purchasing staff sent by the experimental organization. After knowing the other party's information, Li Ming was naturally calm and not panicked. He continued to reply, "Something happened to him, so I was asked to send the supplies back first." After hearing this, Ashby was still skeptical under his serious expression, and his eyes kept looking at Li Ming. At this time, Boner suddenly laughed and stood up, saying, "Then, where are the supplies?" After Li Ming laughed back, he turned his palm and took out the star bag that had been prepared long ago. Seeing the star bag in Li Ming's hand, Ashby was still serious. After a cold snort, he took the star bag from Li Ming's hand, and then his consciousness sensed it. His eyes widened a little, and he hurriedly turned around and handed the star bag to Boner. Seeing Ashby's sudden expression, Odom looked at him in confusion, then looked at Li Ming, and then took the star bag and observed it carefully. After sensing the things inside, Boner's face also changed slightly. Somewhat puzzled and doubtful, he hesitated for a moment, then looked at Ashby and said, "Yes, since Hancock has sent you here, let's go inside and rest first." As he spoke, Boner turned his head towards the building behind him, hinting at the 7th level soldiers with his eyes. Li Ming smiled slightly, and without waiting for the soldiers to do anything, he walked towards the building first. All the soldiers took Li Ming to the distant building, leaving only Boner and Ashby on the desert land. After Boner looked at the star bag in his hand again, he said, "Ashby, what do you think?" Ashby shook his head slightly, his face heavy, and kept looking at Li Ming's figure with doubtful eyes, whispering, "These materials are basically the same as those in our previous order, but will Hancock give the one-way star map key to this person?" Barnaby nodded slowly, agreeing with Ashby's point of view, and replied, "Anyway, the materials are available. As for this person, I still need to meet him alone. After all, it is impossible to determine whether the other party is telling the truth based on the materials alone." Ashby didn't say much, just nodded slightly. Li Ming had entered the building under the guidance of those 7th level soldiers, and was arranged in a separate closed room. At this time, Li Ming was sitting quietly in the room, thinking constantly in his mind. After meeting the 2 9th level soldiers just now, Li Ming still got some information from them, but there was too much information about the entire Bergson prison, and it would take some time to get a deeper understanding. Therefore, the contact with these 2 9th level soldiers was particularly important. The star bag that was given to the other party just now was filled with some materials. These materials were all the items in Li Ming's star bag. They were not very useful to Li Ming, but they were very important to Bergson Star. These materials were mainly used to refine the anti-smog pill, because the prison on Bergson Star was designed in a smog area. These smogs were not the product of the planet itself, but came from a magical beast named turbid. Turbid released poisonous gas, just like smog. The poisonous gas here was not the oxygen of the silent sacrifice star, but the real poisonous gas. The prison and the experimental institution were shrouded in poisonous gas. If you want to enter it, you must take the anti-smog pill. The poisonous gas can effectively control the prisoners, but entering and leaving it requires frequent use of the anti-smog pill, so the materials for refining the anti-smog pill are extremely important. These basic information were seen by Li Ming through his wisdom eyes, but it was only a rough idea. The detailed information had to be learned in detail from the brains of the 2 9th level people. This information had nothing to do with Li Ming, but from Boner's brain, Li Ming vaguely saw information related to Huayu. This information is not very clear, but even if Li Ming vaguely sees information related to Huayu, he must pay more attention, so it is extremely important to stay here, to get more relevant information. Just as Li Ming was thinking about these contents, the portal in the house suddenly flashed, and a person walked in. It was Boner. Upon seeing this person, Li Ming immediately stood up. Boner waved his hand very politely, indicating that Li Ming did not need to be polite, and said, "You can send the materials back in time, and Asibi and I are very grateful, so there is no need to be polite." Li Ming smiled lightly, and returned to his previous position. Boner's wife came to Li Ming, and sat down slowly, still with a smile on her face. After hesitating for a moment, she said, "Since Hancock asked you to bring the materials back first, he must have encountered some trouble. It's just, he gave the star map key to you. Can he still come back?" Li Ming narrowed his eyes, and looked a little serious when he heard this, but soon he smiled and said, "I don't know about this, but there are some things I might as well say directly. As an alchemist, I could have been successful anywhere. If Hancock hadn't promised to give me great benefits, I would not have come to such a place easily." "Oh." Boner's wife was startled and looked at Li Ming again with his eyes and said, "You are an alchemist?" Li Ming smiled faintly and said, "So what? I don't think you have the benefits that Hancock said. It's a wasted trip for me." Boner smiled again and said, "Although our place looks rather desolate, there are still many good things. If you are really an alchemist, I can help Hancock realize the benefits he told you, but being an alchemist is not as simple as just talking. It still needs to be proven in practice." Boner was obviously skeptical of Li Ming. Li Ming nodded slowly, snorted, and said, "Of course, since I said I'm an alchemist, how can I not prove my strength?" Boner nodded with satisfaction, hesitated for a moment, and replied, "I will arrange the alchemy when it is less If you are really an alchemist, we will report it to the senior management of Delano Star, and they will definitely give you a good position. But for now, that star map key, why don't you hand it over first? After all, this is an item from our Bergson Star. If it is lost, we will be held accountable. Li Ming smiled faintly, nodded slightly, and moved his hand. A blue light flashed, and the star map key appeared in his palm, and then he handed it to the other party. Boner took it quickly, looked at the star map key back and forth several times, and then nodded with satisfaction, whispering, "It is indeed the star map key." As he spoke, he clenched his palm, and put the star map key away. He looked at Li Ming with a smile, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Regarding alchemy, I still need to discuss it with a Sibi. You wait here for a while." Li Ming nodded slightly, and said nothing more. As soon as Boner left, Li Ming's face changed several times, and his eyebrows twitched slightly, and he was in trouble. Under the observation of the wisdom eye, Li Ming saw a lot of information about the Bergson Star Experimental Institution. The Bergson Star Experimental Institution mainly conducts some special experiments on prisoners. Even the Huayu that Li Ming saw is just one of the experimental materials here. As for the content of the experiment, Li Ming cannot explore it yet, because these secrets have set up a memory barrier in the other party's brain, which cannot be passively obtained by the wisdom eye. Active exploration will be discovered by the other party, so Li Ming cannot easily test it. When he mentioned that he was an alchemist, the other party's true reaction was dark, and there was also a memory barrier. These unknown contents that could not be explored made Li Ming a little worried. At this time, Boner had returned to the high-rise building and was sitting at a meteorite table with Ashby to discuss something. Ashby stared at Bonner and asked anxiously, "How is it?" Bonner did not respond directly. He took out the star map key and said, "This is the star map key on him." Ashby took it and looked at it carefully. He was still frowning and said, "The star map key is a real star map key, but..." Before Ashby could finish, Bonner spoke first. "But the star map key is an extremely important thing, even more important than Hancock's life. It cannot be handed over to anyone casually. Even if the procurement task is not completed, it cannot be handed over to outsiders. This is the rule of craft." Chapter 299. This is also called a pill. But if this person is an alchemist, then this may make sense. Boner's expression changed, and he suddenly said. Ashby didn't understand what he meant, and just looked at him quietly with his eyes. Boner continued, "In the conversation with this person just now, he said that he was an alchemist, so, should we find a Jelena to try? If he is really an alchemist, then we don't have to be suspicious. This means that Hancock may return to the central system from other critical points, so we don't have to worry. If not, then this person must be eliminated." At the end, Boner showed a sinister look. Ashby nodded repeatedly after hearing this, and suddenly stood up and said, "Okay, then I will go find a Jelena first, and you go and take the kid over." Boner nodded slightly, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. A moment later, in a spacious and huge room, Ashby walked in from a portal. This room is huge, hundreds of meters long and wide. Opposite the portal is a stone road, and on both sides are metal containers that are more than 2 meters high and 3 meters wide, like big pots, made of heavy materials, and with smoke coming out of them. Ashby quickly crossed the stone road and came to a wide place. At this time, an alien was walking slowly in front of 3 stone platforms. Each of the 3 stone platforms is more than 1 meter high and 5 meters long, and the platform is 2 meters wide. They are placed in 3 directions and surround the alien in the middle. There are many nebula tripods and some alchemy tools on the stone platform in the middle. Various materials are placed on the stone platforms on both sides. The alien is holding a wooden stick, hunched over, with dark red hair draped over his shoulders, wearing a grey cloak, and his head is an oval with vertical stripes, which looks a bit like a horse face. The skin on his face is wrinkled, and he looks very old. His left hand keeps flipping on a nebula tripod, and he shakes his head from time to time. Ashby didn't speak directly before and after he came up, but waited quietly. Although they were both at the 9th level, Ashby seemed to be particularly respectful to him. The old woman was a Jelena. Although she was busy, she had already sensed Ashby's presence. Without turning her head, she slowly said, "Are you here to deliver the materials?" The old voice entered his ears. After hesitating for a moment, Ashby replied, Boner will deliver the materials soon. I'm here for another matter. Huh. Agelena's body stopped in surprise. She turned her head and looked at Ashby with pale and weak eyes and said, what's the matter? Ashby did not hesitate and immediately replied, Hancock, who went out for purchasing, recommended an alchemist. We will let you try your hand with him first. Alchemist, he. Agelena shook her head and smiled. After a long sigh, she said, I've met quite a few alchemists here, but none of them are up to par. Ashby's face suddenly became a little ugly, but he did not show it too obviously. He just looked at each other quietly. Angelina fiddled with the nebula cauldron for a while and said, then call him over. But, Angelina raised her head slightly, stared at Ashby, hesitated for a moment, and said, but, you should know the rules. Ashby smiled coldly and replied, I know. After that, he turned around and left quickly. Not long after, Ashby and Boner appeared, and there was another person following behind them. It was Li Ming. As soon as the three appeared, Agelena looked over here, her eyes turned back and forth, and finally stopped on Li Ming. After a disdainful snort, she said, this person is the alchemist you are talking about. Boner smiled slightly, took 2 steps forward, as if she was born with a smile, and said, we didn't intend to offend you, but after all, Hancock recommended it, so we have to trouble you to try it yourself. Well, Agelena nodded slowly, without even looking at Bonalin, and said coldly, I have seen many alchemists. Those who can compare with my strength are at least as old as me. This little guy, he. At the end, Agelena even sighed, and shook her head. While talking, her hands did not stop, fiddling with the nebula cauldron, and taking out a black pill from it. Boner and Asabi also showed hesitation at this time, and looked at Li Ming with a bit of disdain. After all, in their cognition, the training of alchemy masters is long lasting, and most of them are very old. Li Ming is so young, and he doesn't look like an alchemist at all. Agelena played with the black pill in her hand, and her eyes turned to Li Ming, saying contemptuously, see. This is the superior haze removing pill. It took me 14 sidereal days to refine it. Come to me when you reach this level. As she spoke, Agelena casually waved her hand and threw the pill to Li Ming. Li Ming was prepared. He took the black pill in his hand, looked at it carefully from top to bottom, and frowned slightly. Seeing Li Ming's expression, Boner's face was full of disappointment and even a little angry. After all, it was not worth it to offend the alchemist for such a small matter. In desperation, he turned around and smiled at Agelena again. Just when he was about to say something, a light sound of bang was heard. The sound was not loud, but everyone heard it clearly, and the scene suddenly became quiet. The three of them looked at Li Ming at the same time, and saw that Li Ming's fingers were rubbing against each other. The previous black anti-smog pill had disappeared, and only some black powder residue was left on Li Ming's hand. The anti-smog pill was actually crushed into powder by Li Ming. Agelena was furious, her eyes were round, and she was panting heavily. She pointed at Li Ming angrily and said, you kid actually crushed my pill? Boners and Asabi were also shocked. It took them a few seconds to react, and they all cast angry eyes at Li Ming. Without waiting for the two to do anything, Li Ming blew lightly on his fingers, then patted off the powder on his hands and said, I don't know what use this inferior pill has other than destroying it. Li Ming said casually. But when this was said, Boner and Asabi, who were originally ready to get angry, were stunned and looked at each other. Agelena was also furious, her body trembling slightly, and she couldn't speak for a while. Li Ming's mouth corners slightly raised, and he walked forward with a faint smile, and stopped in front of the stone platform. He looked around, and started to operate. Seeing this, Agelena frowned, snorted with disdain, and said, boy, the refining process of the anti-haze pill is complicated, and cannot be completed overnight. This kind of pill is specially prepared for the poisonous fog of the turbid beast. It is not available in that star book, and not everyone can make it. Besides, the current materials are insufficient. How can you refine the pill? Agelena said coldly. Li Ming seemed not to hear it, and ignored him at all, just quietly continuing his operation. Boner and Asabi on the side were also a little at a loss at this time, but they did not want to disturb Li Ming, so they could only hold their temper and wait and see. Li Ming picked up the materials in the nebula cauldron, and his hands kept operating. Agelena's originally disdainful eyes could not help but look straight at him. Because Li Ming's technique was skillful, the operation was smooth. There was no interval, and there was no slowness or hesitation, as if he had refined countless anti-haze pills. For an amateur like Boner, Li Ming's operation was indeed much smoother than Agelena's, which was jaw-dropping, but that was all they could tell. Agelena was different. Her old eyes were wide open, and her mouth couldn't help but slightly open. Her eyes switched back and forth between Li Ming's hands and Li Ming's face. It was hard to believe that this young guy in front of her was so powerful. In front of the three people's eyes, Li Ming's configuration was completed. This was only the first step in alchemy. Then he slowly raised his right hand from in front of him, as if he was holding something up. With this action, the nebula cauldron also flew up. Li Ming's eyes narrowed slightly, and his raised right hand suddenly swiped, and the nebula cauldron quickly rotated in front of his eyes, and Li Ming's right hand aimed at the nebula cauldron, and released a stream of white electric currents. Chapter 300, Under Control. The electric current was like a power source, constantly driving the nebula cauldron to rotate, causing the rotating nebula cauldron to emit a hissing sound, accompanied by arcs jumping around. After a while, Li Ming's right hand suddenly grabbed it with force, and after a hum sound, the nebula cauldron stopped rotating. As soon as this action appeared, the three people on the side were all shocked. Their eyes were wide open, their tongues were in their mouths, and they were all shocked. They didn't even blink, but their eyes kept looking back and forth between the nebula cauldron and Li Ming. Li Ming sighed slightly, with a look of dissatisfaction on his face, but he still reached out to the nebula cauldron. Just as Li Ming's hand was about to touch the nebula cauldron, the muscles under Agelena's eyes trembled slightly, and her old eyes stared at Li Ming closely. Her cracked lips slowly opened, revealing a pair of incomplete grey teeth, and a few words popped out from the gap. No. Possible. Possible. Li Ming's outstretched hand paused, and he looked up at the other party. Agelena suddenly became even more angry when she saw Li Ming's eyes. She pointed at Li Ming with her left hand and said, "I refined this smog removing pill for 14 sidereal days. You finished it in such a short time. Impossible." Li Ming did not respond, but just smiled slightly, then grabbed the nebula cauldron with his right hand, and a black pill was actually taken out. Li Ming held the pill between his two fingers and shook it in front of the three people. The three people's eyes were completely attracted by the pill. The appearance was smooth and crystal clear. Although it was also black, the one in Li Ming's hand was like a black pearl, shining without light, and exuding a strong energy breath. This pill is completely different from the one that Li Ming crushed. If this one is a pearl, then the one that he crushed is at most a piece of coal. Perhaps they had always felt the inferior pills like Agelena's before, but when they suddenly saw the one refined by Li Ming, their eyes lit up. Li Ming looked at the three people and then said, "This pill can resist the poisonous fog for dozens of times longer than the previous one, but it's not the best." As he spoke, Li Ming shook his head slightly, as if he was not very satisfied with the one in front of him. "I don't believe it." Agelena roared angrily, and suddenly stretched out her hand towards Li Ming. 4 fingers grabbed hard, and a suction force came out from the palm of her hand. The pill in Li Ming's hand flashed out under this suction, and flew into Agelena's hand. Agelena put the pill in front of her eyes, her old face instantly tightened, and her eyes widened a little. After looking at the anti-haze pill for a moment, her eyes turned to Li Ming. After taking a deep breath, Agelena gradually calmed down and said, "This pill is really good, but as for the effect of removing haze, it still needs to be tested." Bonnet nodded slightly. Judging from the feeling alone, this pill is indeed excellent, but as for its effect, it still needs to be verified. At this time, Ashby suddenly stepped forward, took the pill from Agelena's hand, and said, "Then I'll try it." Having said that, Ashby turned and walked out. At this time, Bonnet looked at Li Ming with a different look. Just when he was about to say something, the armor on his right arm suddenly made a beeping sound. Bonnet quickly raised his arm and looked intently. He saw a blue light flashing on the armor, and a message had emerged. The content of the message only flashed for a moment and disappeared, but after reading the message, Bonnet's face also changed slightly. His eyebrows shrank slightly, as if something urgent had happened. After hesitating for a while, He turned his eyes to Angelina and said, I have something urgent to do here and need to leave for a while. We will talk about alchemy when I come back later. As soon as he finished speaking, Bona's eyes hurriedly left. Li Ming narrowed his eyes slightly, looking at Bona's hurried figure, frowned slightly, and saw the reason why Bona left with his wisdom eyes. But just as Li Ming was thinking, Angelina suddenly came forward. Hearing the sound of her wooden stick hitting the ground, Li Ming immediately turned around and kept looking at her. Angelina smiled coldly at first, and then said, boy, the elixir you just refined is really good, but here, I have the final say. Even if you really have some skills, you can't replace me. Hehe. Li Ming then let out bursts of light laughter and sighed for a long time, as if he was mocking the other party's ignorance. Angelina was suddenly startled when she heard this. She looked at Li Ming sternly with a puzzled look on her face and said, what are you laughing at? Li Ming's eye twitched and he glanced at him contemptuously and said, since you have been here for so long, then tell me, why is only one alchemist allowed here? Angelina shook her head left and right when she heard this, and after laughing a few times, she said, this is the rule of alchemists. Is there any alchemist who allows two to exist in the same place at the same time? Alchemists are scarce. No matter which force it is, maintaining their own uniqueness is a guarantee of their status. Don't you even know this? Angelina continued, her brows full of disdain for Li Ming's ignorance. Li Ming didn't care and nodded, saying, you are talking about the civilized galaxy. It's different here. You know more about the elixirs here than I do. They are all enhanced elixirs for experimental institutions. Aren't those ordinary prisoners the experimental subjects? Such experiments require more powerful alchemy masters to operate. Similarly, this kind of experiment cannot be known to others. If you want fewer people to know, you need fewer people to operate. So an alchemist, one is enough here. Li Ming said slowly, word by word. Angelina listened carefully and was skeptical about what Li Ming said. She kept thinking with her eyes rolling. Li Ming continued, based on my ability to refine elixirs, you may have two. When he said this, Angelina's face suddenly became uglier, and she was even a little worried. Li Ming looked calm and composed as he continued, you took the initiative to hand over your alchemy formula and data to Bona. Didn't you think about the reason? All the data is prepared for a more powerful alchemist. Once that powerful alchemist appears, you will have to go to bed. Li Ming continued. Angelina was a little nervous at this moment, as if everything Li Ming said made sense, but after thinking about it carefully, she felt that something was wrong. She walked back and forth with a solemn expression. How do you know this? Did Bona tell you? Angelina asked hurriedly. Li Ming sighed again and said, it doesn't matter how I know, but if you want to survive, you can only listen to me, otherwise, you will die. Angelina did not reply immediately. Her eyes were moving as she kept thinking. She was already 70% sure of what Li Ming said, and 30% doubtful. Li Ming ignored her, and turned around, and started walking away, preparing to leave. Angelina was startled when she saw this and asked, where are you going? Li Ming continued to walk, and said without turning his head, do your own thing. You are not qualified to ask about my affairs. As he said this, Li Ming's figure had already entered the portal and disappeared. After just a brief encounter, Li Ming turned the tables, as if he was already in control of this place. This made Angelina slightly startled when she heard it. Li Ming's confident expression seemed to have controlled everything. This was a strength that others could not understand. At this moment, in the distance of the building where Li Ming was, a cloud of smog was approaching a circular building. This cloud of smog was completely separated from the huge cloud of smog in the distance, just like a small piece of cotton was separated. But even such a small cloud of smog was enough to terrify the people in the circular building. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.